Donald Mile, Kathy Rudisil, Michael Rainey, Stephen Kenny, and Marvin Butler. The Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial body that is governed by the North Carolina General Statutes and the city's Unified Development Ordinance. We are authorized to hear requests for variances from the city's UDO, special use permits, and other requests as may be provided by the city's ordinances. In hearing cases, the board conducts a quasi-judicial evidentiary hearing. That means it's like a court hearing. State law sets specific procedures and rules concerning how this board must make its decisions. The standard the applicant must meet to be granted their request is set forth in the UDO. The board hears and considers evidence presented at the hearing and applies the standard when making its decision. The board must base its decisions upon competent, material, and substantial evidence presented at the hearing. If you will be speaking as a witness, please focus on the facts and standards, not personal preference or opinion. Witnesses may testify as to facts to which they are competent to testify, so long as those facts relate to the legal standards. In addition, lay or non-expert witness testimony is limited to facts, not opinions. For certain topics, this board needs to hear opinion testimony from expert witnesses. These topics include projections about impacts on property values and projections about impacts on traffic safety. Focusing your testimony and arguments on the applicable facts and standards will allow the board to hear cases in an efficient and timely manner. Since today's meeting will be conducted remotely, in addition to the general quasi-judicial rules, today's hearings will be conducted in accordance with state statutes that allow for remote evidentiary hearings during the current COVID-19 states of emergency. For the convenience of those participating today, I'm going to outline how we will conduct today's remote evidentiary hearings. First, all witnesses must be sworn in. Because of the remote format, individuals who sign up to speak, as well as city staff participants, have already signed a written oath form, which will be reaffirmed on the record as they testify today. Participants have also already provided written consent to today's remote meeting. We will begin with a staff presentation from a member of the planning department. Following staff's presentation, the applicant will be acknowledged to present their case and witnesses. The Board of Adjustment will acknowledge the attorney or applicant for each case first as the point person for the applicant. Following the applicant, anyone else who signed up to participate in support or opposition to the request will be given the opportunity to speak. The applicant will be given the opportunity for cross-examination as well as rebuttal and closing statement. When all testimony is complete, we will close the evidentiary hearing. The board members will deliberate and vote on the case. For variance request, a 4/5 vote of the board is required to grant the variance. For all other hearings and matters, the decision will be made by a simple majority vote of the board. Following the meeting, the board's decision will be prepared with written findings of fact and conclusions of law. The decision will be incorporated into the meeting minutes and will be adopted at the same time the meeting minutes are adopted. We will now conduct the evidentiary hearings on today's agenda. We have no old business this week. We'll start with new business, evidentiary hearing 1. The case is 400 and 410 Glenwood Avenue, 400 Glenwood Avenue LLC, and 410 Glenwood Avenue LLC property owners. This is a variance BOA 0070-2021. Eric Hodge will be making the presentation. Mr. Hodge, let me affirm your oath. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Go right ahead.
Just one moment. I've received a communication from another applicant. I want to make sure they're being shown
Okay.
correctly as an attendee before we get. Alrighty, thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Maddox is showing as an attendee, so just she's listening. She's not for this case, but have her teed up for when she is ready. So BOA 70-2021. I wanted to note that the subject property is located at 400 Glenwood Avenue and 410 Glenwood Avenue. Property owner again is 400 Glenwood Avenue Property LLC and 410 Glenwood Avenue Property LLC. The first two portions of their request are no longer needed by the applicant. So the variance listed as number 1 and number 2 is no longer on the table for consideration, which leaves the third request and everything following. So the first item is a 2-foot variance from the required 3-foot primary street setback as set forth in UDO section 3.2.6.B1 for the proposed 410 Glenwood Avenue mixed-use building. Oop, I just realized I'm not sharing my screen.
I knew you'd get to it eventually.
So everyone's seeing that now? All right. So again, this is a 2-foot variance from the required 3-foot primary street setback as set forth in UDO section 3.2.6.B1 for the proposed 410 Glenwood Avenue mixed-use building along West North Street. The second portion of the request, originally labeled as request portion 4, is a 2-foot variance from the required 3-foot side street setback as set forth in UDO section 3.2.6.B2 for the proposed 410 Glenwood Avenue mixed-use building along West North Street. The original 5th portion of the request is a variance from the required 0 or 6-foot side setback as set forth in UDO section 3.2.6.B for the proposed 410 Glenwood Avenue mixed-use building's eastern facade in order to allow a variable width setback ranging from 0 to 8 feet. And lastly, a variance from the required 0 or 6-foot rear setback as set forth in UDO section 3.2.6.B for the proposed 410 Glenwood Avenue mixed-use building's eastern facade in order to allow a variable width setback ranging from 0 to 8 feet in order to construct one mixed-use tower on 400 Glenwood Avenue and one mixed-use tower on 410 Glenwood Avenue on a combined 2.39 acre property. So the property again is zoned downtown mixed use 40 conditional use. This is an aerial. In the northwest corner of the site is the building we all know as the Creamery building. That is proposed to remain with this development project. The areas shown in gray are where the majority of the redevelopment is occurring, again with 2 towers, one at the southwest corner of this block, and then the other running along the eastern side of the property between both North Street and Tucker Street, with the eastern boundary of the property being the railroad track. Here's a rendering giving you a little more context. So in this image, north is to the bottom left corner. Behind the tower, the shorter of the 2 towers, again, that's the railroad track looking east. The smaller building in the foreground is the Creamery building, again, proposed to remain. And then the larger tower there at the corner of North and Glenwood Avenue. I'm happy to answer any questions you have at this time, but I do know the applicant has a pretty detailed presentation that would go into a lot more of the specifics. And I think that you'll be able to understand what's under consideration once we go through the applicant's materials, but happy to answer anything if you have anything of me at this time.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any questions for Mr. Hodge? Okay, let's move on to the applicant, Collier Marsh. I believe you will be speaking for the applicant today. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Swink and members of the board. I'm Collier Marsh with Parker Poe 301 Fayetteville Street on behalf of the applicant. I'd like to start by asking that our application, presentation, case report, and supporting materials be accepted into the record.
Okay.
And we have several folks on the line, but we have one witness that I think most of the testimony will come from, and that's Fred Belladin, if we want to swear Fred in to start.
Okay, let me go ahead and do that. Mr. Belden, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, so the variances we have today relate to the proposed redevelopment of the historic Pine State Creamery site. As Eric mentioned, we're at 400 and 410 Glenwood Avenue. So 2 parcels, but 1 comprehensive development that looks at the whole site as a whole. One of the things we're most excited about with this project is that as part of the redevelopment, the creamery itself, which is a local historic landmark, is being preserved. So our redevelopment occurs on the remainder of the site. The site's gone through a number of approvals to get to this point already. Hopefully this is the last of the hearings, but the site was recently rezoned to DX40CU. We obtained 2 certificates of appropriateness from the Raleigh Historic Development Commission. The first of those addressed the overall massing, the setbacks, and the height of the project. And then the second got into a lot more of the detail and addressed the building design and materials. And then just last week, we went to the Appearance Commission where we had a group of design alternates that were approved. So lots of steps to get here. And the reason for a lot of these, I guess, needs for relief is that, as the board can imagine, when you commit to the preservation of a historic building on a site like this, to then develop high-rise development around it, in a manner that still honors the historic building, the historic creamery here, and also advances historic preservation goals, it creates a number of different challenges and leads to complications that we need to resolve, in this case, through variances. And just for reference here, the slide we're looking at, among many of the features of this project, there's a lot of pedestrian amenities and unique aspects to the pedestrian realm that just aren't present on Glenwood Avenue today. So one of those is a large public plaza that we're looking at here. And then there's a Woonerf internal to the site that activates the pedestrian realm within the site. We do think this will be a transformative project for Glenwood South, and we're excited to tell you more about it. If we could go to the next slide, please. So this slide shows the site's current condition and the surrounding area for context, and Eric covered a bit of this, but again, orienting the board. If we look at the left-hand slide, left-hand image on the slide, that's oriented north, south, east, west, or north at the top. The property, the 400 parcel is that southwest corner. So you see a dashed line outlining the 400 parcel. That's the smaller of the 2 parcels. And then the remainder is the 410 parcel. And the relief we're seeking is specific to the 410 parcel today. But again, it's a comprehensive development, so we're trying to include everything together. The creamery is in the northwest corner of the site, that upper left-hand corner of the picture, and that's what's being preserved. The development essentially will wrap around that. And if we move to the image on the right-hand side, that just shows the creamery in the forefront, or the foreground, where we flipped 180 degrees here, and the development would be to the rear of the site. And I guess it's also worth pointing out, it's pertinent to these requests, the railroad tracks and the railroad right-of-way is the eastern boundary to this property, and that will factor into one of our 2 requests. And then that 400 parcel, that smaller parcel, as part of the zoning conditions, has shop front frontage applied to it, which has an impact on build-tos and setbacks. But the remainder of the parcel could not have shop front frontage applied because the existing creamery building is in conflict with those requirements. So if we're going to keep it, we couldn't meet it. Otherwise, couldn't meet it. The urban design guidelines would have called for shop front frontage to apply to the whole site. Next slide, please. So this slide shows, again, the development concept for the site, and then showing how the development will wrap around the creamery building. So again, the 410 parcel, the larger parcel, will have the creamery preserved at the corner of Glenwood Avenue and Tucker. It's wrapped by the plaza and the Woonerf. And then there will be a 20-story mixed-use tower. It's labeled as office tower on the right-hand side, that runs along the railroad side of the property. It has frontage on Tucker and West North Street. Again, to keep you organized, that's the parcel that we're seeking relief on. It will be the West North Street frontage where we're seeking setback relief, and then the eastern property line. The 400 parcel will be a 36-story mixed-use tower, and it has frontage on Glenwood and West North Street. It's in the southwest corner of the site. There's also a galleria accessible to pedestrians and limited vehicle traffic that runs between the two towers. And again, you can see that large plaza running between the two sites, and the Wooners running between the creamery and the 20-story building. Next slide, please. So these are just some representative renderings of the project to show you where we're headed with it. The upper left-hand image shows the view from the intersection of Glenwood and Tucker. You see the preserved creamery in the foreground, the two mixed-use towers in the background. Then if you move to the middle image, we have the public plaza that we talked about that wraps the creamery. That's, I guess, south of the creamery and between the creamery and the proposed 36-story tower. The upper right image is then a close-up of that plaza and the entrance to the 400 parcel, the office tower there. The bottom left image shows the Glenwood Avenue frontage with the 400 parcel on the right-hand side. And then as you move left, you see the plaza, the creamery, and then and we'll touch on this in a bit more detail, but the ground level facades are designed to reflect the creamery itself. Moving to the bottom right image, this is the West North Street facade. This is where one of the areas where we're seeking relief for the building on the right-hand side there on the 410 parcel. So they're both portions of both proposed buildings shown there. And these buildings are essentially connected to one another. So you can see the Galleria, which is between the two buildings where limited vehicle traffic and pedestrians can go under, but that's covered. And then the buildings would be connected to one another with the area shown with plantings. And so one of the things that we'll factor in is that we want to make sure these two buildings can align with one another to have appropriate connections between them. Next slide, please. So the variances we're seeking today all relate to the setbacks for that proposed 20-story mixed-use tower that's on the 410 parcel. This slide shows the relevant provisions of the UDO that we're seeking relief from. So we're at section 3.2.6b. And so the first group are the primary and side street setbacks, which are 3 feet in the DX district. And then the second group of setbacks we're seeking relief for are the side and rear lot line setbacks, which are it's an alternate, either 0 feet or 6 feet in the DX district. So two things I want to point out with each of these requests. First, as I alluded to, we do have frontage on one site, the 400 site, but not the 410. But the UDO provides that if a frontage applies to the zoning of the site and the frontage has a build-to that conflicts with the setback requirements, that frontage is build-to actually controls. So here, the 400 parcel has shop front frontage. And what the UDO says is that you can have a 0-foot build-to with shop front frontage. So that 400 parcel is allowed to have a 0-foot build-to and doesn't have to comply with this 3-foot setback. But the 410 parcel, because we couldn't apply shop front frontage to it with the creamery, doesn't have the benefits provided by shop front frontage, but otherwise we've done our best to align the two buildings together. The second thing that I wanted to bring the board's attention to is the intent of the alternate 0-foot or 6-foot setback for side and rear lot lines. The code permits 0-foot setbacks because it can allow buildings to actually touch one another. However, in the event that buildings don't actually reach that lot line, the code prevents a situation where you have too narrow of a setback. So if you were allowed a 1-foot setback on one property line or for one building and 0 or 1, whatever on the other side, you could have too narrow and an inaccessible space between two buildings. So the idea is either buildings go right up against each other or at the minimum, they are 6 feet apart. And it's important to point that out because that code alternate between 0 feet and 6 feet is meant to prevent a condition that can occur at our site because the lot line we're looking at is adjacent to railroad right-of-way where there are no buildings and cannot be any buildings. Next slide, please. So as noticed in the board's materials, we were originally seeking 6 total variances. although they only involved three total setbacks. Variances 1 and 2 related to Tucker Street, but our team worked some more to try and make some adjustments, and we no longer need relief on Tucker Street. So we have eliminated items 1 and 2 from our request, which takes us then to items 3 and 4. Those relate to the West North Street setbacks, and we're seeking a 2-foot variance to allow a 1-foot setback on West North Street. But that is listed as 2 variances, one for the primary street and one for the side street, because due to the different buildings and entrances, it's not clear whether we have a primary street or side street. So we ask for both, just to make it clear under either interpretation. Then the next 2, or the last 2 variances, are variances 5 and 6 in your materials. They relate to the setback on the eastern property line along those railroad tracks. They seek a variable width setback ranging from 0 feet to 8 feet. Like the previous variances, it's listed separately as a side lot line and rear lot line setback because it's not clear which applies. So we're just asking for both, but it really is just one setback. So at this point, I'd like to call our witness, Fred Belladin. So Fred, if you could state your name, your address, your education, and your experience for the board.
Good afternoon. My name's Fred Belladin, 711 Gaston Street, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27605. I'm a principal with Clearscapes. I've been a practicing architect for more than 25 years and have been working in downtown Raleigh for nearly all of that time period. Our firm is focused on creating places that bring people together, and we bring a particular focus to urban infill, adaptive use, and historic preservation. Personally, I bring extensive experience with historic preservation requirements and best practices. Our firm's completed hundreds of designated local, state, and federal historic projects. I've chaired the Raleigh Historic Development Commission and Preservation North Carolina, and I now serve on the National Register Advisory Board for North Carolina.
So at this time, I would like to tender Fred as an expert in architecture, building design, and historic preservation.
Okay, thank you.
Fred, can you explain your role in this project?
Sure. I am contributing as a consulting architect for this project. I'm assisting the design and development teams on design, regulatory, and historic preservation issues in general. And we are leading the renovations to the historic Creamery building.
All right, if we could go to the next slide, please. All right, so Fred, if you don't mind, if you could just walk the board through the factors that are driving the setbacks and then the relief that we are seeking.
Sure. In this particular case, the source of the first variance or pair of variances is related to reconciling the differences between the 400 and 410 parcels. In particular, with the Creamery as the centerpiece for the redevelopment of the project, we are applying historic preservation best practices throughout the project. And those are exemplified through the 2 certificates of appropriateness that we've received. And then conversely, as Collier pointed out, the 400 parcel, because it is not part of the landmark designation, has a slightly different set of streetscape requirements based on the UDO. Next slide, please. So on this particular slide, you are looking at Tucker Street. The historic Creamery is the lighter gray building to the left, and the new office building is the darker gray building to the right. As Collier outlined earlier, we've been able to resolve the setback question here, so we can move on to the next slide. Okay. On this project, you are looking at that West North Street frontage. The building you see to the left is the residential tower on the 400 parcel. The building you see to the right is the office tower on the 410 parcel. And where you see the arrow in between is the Wooner, or the space between them. For this project, for the preservation approach we established during the COA approval process, both buildings should be in the same plane to maintain the continuity of the street wall. The residential tower on the left aligns with the sidewalk as outlined per the UDO for its shop front frontage. However, the office tower on the right, because we cannot apply shop front frontage, is subject to the 3-foot step back. So basically what we are seeking relief for is for 2 foot of this 3-foot required step back for the office building to allow it to to allow it to align with the face of the residential building to maintain the continuity of the streetscape. Next slide, please. And then finally, at the eastern edge of the site, you're looking at a blow up of the irregular property line in comparison to the eastern building wall of the office tower. As you can see in the orange, it's a highly irregular property line that somehow came about over years of history where an industrial site adjoined an existing railroad right-of-way. And for this project, we are working carefully with the building design to maintain historically appropriate design. The irregularity of the facade, if we were to align the building precisely with it, would result in a facade that would be historically inconsistent with what we need to achieve with the creamery building. Therefore, rather than meeting either the 0-foot or the 6-foot minimum step back, we're asking for relief for the variable setback to allow us to simplify that facade as much as possible to be consistent with the historic design parameters established through the CMA process. And I think that's all I have, so I'll turn it back over to Collier.
Great, thanks, Fred. If we could go to the next slide, please. So I'll just quickly review the application of the variance findings to each of our requests, starting with that West North Street request where we're seeking a 2-foot variance from the 3-foot requirement in order to have a 1-foot setback. Here, unnecessary hardship results because strict application of the ordinance results in conflicting standards for our 2 buildings. Again, we're doing our best to align all buildings with the existing street line and street wall established by the creamery. We're able to do that on the 400 parcel because it has shop front frontage that allows us to go right up to the streetscape and right up to the property line. Unfortunately, the same creamery that dictates building placement prevents us from applying shop front to the 410 parcel. So we don't have the same rules that apply, and we don't get to go to 0 feet automatically. So we have to seek relief. And this variance allows us to resolve that conflict and allows us to advance those historic preservation goals that drove the building design. Hardship results from conditions peculiar to the property. It's the existence of the historic creamery, and it allows us to do what we think is one of the best features of this project. We can preserve it this way. We can design a project around it that honors it in the most appropriate way. Did not result from actions taken by the applicant or the owner. This is merely, again, the existence of that historic building that's, dates back several decades. It's also consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance because this resolves a conflict between the application of shopfront frontage across the entire site, but it also allows us to advance the historic preservation goals and to design a project with historic preservation best practices. Turning to the application of the factors for the eastern property line, strict application of the ordinance results in unnecessary hardship because, well, one, that eastern property line has an irregular shape developed over an interesting history of being along that railroad right-of-way. We've done our best to adapt to that shape, but it results in some complications, and we can't fit everything perfectly. But unnecessary hardship, I think, more notably results because the intent of that alternate 0-foot or 6-foot requirement just doesn't apply here. Again, that the purpose is to present a situation where you have 2 buildings that somehow have too close of a setback, somewhere less than 6 feet between the 2. But that can't occur here because we have railroad tracks and railroad right-of-way, so there's no building that's going to go immediately adjacent to our parcel. Again, results from conditions peculiar to the property. It's the property line and the railroad right-of-way, not the result of the actions taken by the applicant. And then it's consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance. Really, it's kind of the inverse here. The intent of the ordinance, that 0-foot or 6-foot setback, just doesn't apply here. So it's consistent because there's no need to have 6 feet, and instead having a appropriately designed and as linear as we can make it, setback is the appropriate solution here. So with that, we respectfully request that the board vote to approve our variances. We presented competent material and substantial evidence to support each of them, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Marsh, Mr. Belden. Board members, do you have any questions regarding this case? Anyone? No? We had no one else signed up to speak either in support or in opposition to this. So unless there's further comment from any of our participants, I will close the evidentiary hearing. And we'll move to our board deliberations and certainly entertain a motion.
Nothing further from the applicant. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Board members? Comment?
I don't have any questions. I'd make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Koontz. We have a motion to approve. May I have a second? Mr. Mile, I read your lips that you offered a second. So we have a motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion? Let's move to a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. On the motion to approve, Mr. Koontz?
Approve?
Thank you, Mr. Mile.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Swank.
Approve?
Thank you, Ms. Rudisil.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Where are you? Rainey, there you are.
Approve.
Thank you. All set.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move along to evidentiary hearing 2. This is 4102 and 4108 Virtuous Street, South Raleigh Suites, QOZB LLC property owner. And this is a variance BOA 75-2021. Mr. Hodge, you're presenting again. We have a transportation person available. If we need to, I will swear him in at the time.
All right. Property owner, South Raleigh Suites, QOZB LLC, seeks a variance for complete relief from dumpster location requirements as set forth in UDO section 7.2.5.C.1 and 2, a variance of 145 feet from the driveway spacing requirements along Virtuous Street as set forth in UDO section 8.3.5.C and Raleigh Street Design Manual, Article 9.5, which requires driveways accessing up to 80-foot wide street rights of way to be spaced 200 feet apart, center line to center line. It results in a driveway located within 55 feet, center line to center line, from the adjoining lot at 4116 Virtuous Street for the construction of a hotel on a 3.63 acre site zoned industrial mixed use 3. So the property is located near the intersection of Jones Sausage Road and I-40. It's an industrial area. For those of you familiar with this parts of town, the property in the lower right-hand corner with the IH is the Pepsi bottling plant, just to sort of orient you. There you can see on the right side, the Pepsi Way is the Pepsi facility. Currently, this parcel has this configuration. There is a proposal to move the property line between these two parcels to the northeast, thereby making this property at the lower portion of these two sites larger, and that's really the portion of the property under discussion for today's variances. The first is they're seeking to have a dumpster location that's not doesn't conform entirely to the requirements in terms of locational requirements set forth in 725C1. Let me go over those briefly. It says trash collection, trash compaction, recycling collection, and other similar service areas shall be located to the side or rear of buildings and must be screened from view from adjacent property or public street right of way. I'll let the applicant go into further detail regarding the dumpster facility, but it is proposed to be in the northeast corner. If north in this image is at the top, the upper right-hand corner of the site. The second portion of the request deals with the driveway in the lower left-hand corner of the site, where it is too close to the driveway on the property that's located to the southwest of this one or to the left in this image. Ideally, it would have been located further to the right in this image to better align with the driveway across the street. We do have transportation on the line if you'd like any more specific detail regarding their thoughts and viewpoints on this variance. Otherwise, I'm happy to turn it over to the board for any further questions of me or transportation staff at this point. Not sure if transportation wants to make any comments, but I would invite you to give them that opportunity if you'd like before the applicant makes a presentation.
Okay. Mr. Kimbrell, is there anything you wish to say? If so, I will reaffirm your oath.
We might have Mr. Kidd on, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
I have
this is
Bradley
Kevin
Kimbrell
Kidd.
listed here.
I think we have Kevin Kidd from
Oh, Kevin Kidd.
transportation.
Okay. Mr. Kidd, is there anything you wish to say, or are you going to just be available for questions?
The only statement I would have is we spoke at length with the applicant, and I'm available for any questions.
Well, before you do, then let me go ahead and swear you in to make it official, or reaffirm your oath, please. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Kidd. Now go right ahead.
Yeah, we just spoke at length with Ms. Maddox and her client, and don't have any concerns to state for the board today.
Okay, Glenn, thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate you being here. Okay, board members, do you have any questions for either Mr. Kidd or for Mr. Hodge? No one? All right, let's move along to the applicant then. Isabel Maddox is here to speak to the case. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Good. I'm on a new device today, so I was a little bit concerned that it might not work. I'm Isabel Maddox, PO Box 946, Raleigh 27602. I'm here today representing South Raleigh Suites QOZB LLC, which is an entity developing a hotel in an opportunity zone. Paul Meter, engineer with Rivers and Associates, is also on the line, and we can get him to talk about any specificity about the engineering issues. First, I'd like to make a motion that the excuse me, application materials and exhibits be admitted for the record.
Okay.
And so go to our next slide, please. So we do have some hardships on this site. You saw the site plan a little bit, and we'll get to it again in a minute. We've got on this site, we actually have frontage on 3 streets, Jones Sausage, Virtuous, and I think it's Generosity. These street names are great. It's also a fairly small site. We do have a shod overlay. We have challenging topo with significant fall from the rear of the site to the front of the site. But there's 3 street frontages. So what is the frontage? And that's one of the main issues on the first request. Go to the next slide, please. So we actually have 2 primary streets here, and so therefore 2 front yards. One is on Jones Sausage, and one is on Virtuous Street. Jones Sausage being on the top of your screen, and Virtuous being on the lower side of your screen. So for the dumpster placement, it's got to be in the rear or side yard. Here we sort of snugged it into the corner, but it doesn't really comply with the requirement because it's too close to the front, because we have 2 front yards. So we put it, you can see, I think, where it is in that sort of northeastern corner of the site. I can't use a pointer to show it, but yeah, there we go, right in there. And so we've placed that, and it's adjacent to the future property line. As Eric mentioned, this site will be recombined to move the property line that bisects this site over to the right a little bit to leave a larger parcel for the hotel, and a little smaller parcel will remain as an out parcel for future development. So we put the dumpster up against that site, and we'll continue to own both sites, at least for the short term, and can certainly screen that on the other side as well when we get to that development. But for this purposes of this hearing, there will be a street yard adjacent to Jones Sausage. There's also 16 feet of fall that go down from Jones Sausage. So you really won't be able to see the dumpster from Jones Sausage. Next slide, please. So that shows a little bit better where the dumpster is. The green shows the landscaping that will be there that will screen that that dumpster. And I think the topo there is significant that will, eliminate really any ability to see it from the street. Next slide, please. So on this side is a depiction of the location of the drives. The red, little red overlay is where if we made this drive immediately opposite to the one across the street, that's where it would be. So it would move over a little bit. It still would not satisfy the spacing requirements between two driveways. The problem we have is not with our own driveway, but rather with the driveway on the industrial site to the west. And so I think we maintain 55 feet, and that would maybe move it to 70 feet, but it really wouldn't get you to meet the requirement. And we don't think it's really that meaningful, the placement opposite the driveway across the street, because across the street is Sunbelt Rentals Equipment Company, and that's where their service entrance is. We don't really anticipate that the hotel patrons coming out of our site are going to want to go across the intersection. So whereas most of the time you want a four-legged intersection for the streets opposing each other to be directly aligned, because you want the traffic to move efficiently across the intersection. In this case, we don't anticipate there being really any traffic that goes from the Sunbelt Rentals to the hotel site. They're just totally different types of users. And similarly, we don't think it's really a big issue that we don't meet the driveway spacing requirement vis-a-vis the industrial site to our left or west. Again, I think it's a warehouse or distribution facility, and we think the hours of operation, the hours that their traffic will be coming and going, will be different from the hotel patrons, and a different type of traffic. Generally speaking, even though this is an industrial area, it's a fairly, I don't think it's a high traffic area. So I don't think that you have a lot of safety issues with regard to driveway spacing. So if you go to the next slide, please. And we do believe that we do have hardships here. We have frontage on 3 streets. We have significant fall on the property. We have, the character of the traffic. It varies in this area. We're proposing to do a hotel, which we think will bring a much needed hotel to this area. It is an opportunity zone development. It'll bring some jobs to the area. And we think that the dumpster will be well screened by vegetation and by the fall and the property elevation. The driveway spacing we think will maintain efficient movement and traffic. It's a dead end street, light industrial traffic, and we don't think the operation hours, the traffic hours will be the same for these two types of traffic. And we think that it's a real benefit to the city to have a hotel on this site. So I do think that we have shown you that we have hardships. Those hardships were not self-created. We do think that safety will be preserved, and that this will be a positive development for the city. And Mr. Meter is here to answer your engineering questions, and I'm here to answer whatever other questions you might have. Thank you.
Rodney, I think you're muted.
Thank you. I need to be muted, but not always. Ms. Maddox, I said thank you, and I was asking if the board had any questions they wish to ask either her or her consultant, Mr. Meter. No one else signed up to speak either in support or opposition to this. Ms. Maddox, I think you summed up nicely. Any last word from you?
No, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Hodge, anything else from you?
No, sir.
Board members, last chance. We're good. Let's close the evidentiary hearing and move to our board deliberations, please. Entertain a motion. I will move approval of this as proposed. I'll ask for a second.
Second.
I'll second.
Ms. Rudisill offered a second, so we have a motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion? Let's move to a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. On the motion to approve, Mr. Swank,
Approve?
Ms. Rudisill,
Approve.
thank you, Mr. Mile,
Approve.
thank you, Mr. Rainey,
Approve.
thank you, and who am I missing?
Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Coons, sorry.
Approve.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to evidentiary hearing 3. This is 322 Bragg Street, Triangle Building and Properties LLC, the property owners, and this also is a variance, 77-2021. And Mr. Hodge, I believe you're presenting on this as well.
Yes, sir. The applicant, Triangle Building and Properties LLC, requests a 5.9-foot variance from the required 14.5-foot front yard setback as set forth in UDO section 5.4.3.f.18.e, which requires the front yard setback to be within 10% of the average front yard setback established by buildings on the same side of the block face of the proposed building, but not less than 8 feet nor greater than 30 feet. Second part of the request is a 2.5-foot variance from the maximum allowed encroachment of 9 feet for porches as set forth in UDO section 1.5.4.d.1.a, which allows porches and steps to extend up to 9 feet, including steps into a required setback, provided that such extension is at least 3 feet from the vertical plane of any lot line. And 3, a 5.9-foot variance from the maximum allowed encroachment of 4 feet for bay windows and vestibules as set forth in UDO section 1.5.4.d.1.g, which allows bay windows, oriels, vestibules, and similar features that are less than 10 feet wide to extend up to 4 feet, provided that such extension is at least 3 feet from the vertical plane of any lot line. If approved, these variances would result in an 8.6-foot front yard setback, an 11.5-foot porch and step encroachment into the required setback, and a 9.9-foot bay window and vestibule encroachment into the required setback associated with the construction of a detached house on a 0.05-acre property zoned residential 10 and South Park Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District. This is the proposed structure. This is a similar request to one we saw, I believe it was at your January hearing. Same applicant, similar home, similar lot configuration as was under consideration. Then again, if you look at the block face, you can see there's some disparity between the depth of this particular lot shown in red and others along the block face, which within the center of the block have much deeper lots. And then further to the west, those lots are oriented to a different street, South Person Street. So the applicant is seeking the ability to locate similarly to adjacent properties. However, the methodologies set forth in the Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District don't exactly reveal a similar setback. I will note that the north is to the top here, which is why Bragg Street's shown upside down. The surveyor did not put north to the top of the survey, so we did flip it up just for to keep the orientation with the same as as shown on other maps. Happy to answer any questions you may have at this time. I know the applicant's got a lot more detail to go over, but If you have any questions of me, I'm happy to answer them.
Great, thank you, Mr. Hodge. Board members, questions? None? Okay, let's move on. Holden McLemore, I believe you're representing the applicant today. If you have any witnesses you wish to call, I need to reaffirm their oath, but I'll welcome you.
Thank you, Chairman Swink and members of the board. Thanks for having me this afternoon. I am representing the property owner, Triangle Building and Properties LLC. I will be brief. I will just make a motion for the application materials and presentation materials to be included in the record at the appropriate time. And I'm going to yield my time to Mr. Will Choi, who can go over more of the details with the board.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Choi, if you would please state your name, address, and relationship to the case, I will reaffirm.
Yes, my name is Will Choi. My address is 602 East Target Street, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27601. I am the architect on this project and the designer of this on this property.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Okay.
So I'll get started. And as Eric described, this is really a request that deals with front setbacks, which is request number 1, requesting for a 5.9 foot setback encroachment. And request 2 and 3 is really a related setback request that has to do with the resulting conditions and sort of pushing up all the other building features along with the push up of the building facade. So the porch, the steps, any architectural features. Request 2 and 3 have to do with ensuring that the building's front face would still have the opportunity to have those additional elements on top of that building face. So if we go to the next slide, these are the relevant video sections, which has already been covered. So we can move on to the next one. So here we are with north facing up, and I apologize about that survey's north arrow. I don't know why that keeps happening. But 322 is our project site, which is hatched in red there. And as Eric mentioned, the application of the NCOD rules, which states that your front setback needs to be 10% of the block face. That's it's a provision that I think is intended to create a strong street edge presence for the sidewalk and the adjoining streets. And in this particular case, because of a non-conforming condition found at 306 Bragg Street, all there on the left side of this particular site plan, we have a average setback that results in something, let's see here, 14.5 feet for project site at 322. And that's quite different from the adjacent buildings that have setbacks that range from 8.9 feet to 11.3 feet. And again, the request here is that we're given the appropriate amount of setback encroachment such that we can match the conditions of the adjacent buildings and as a result create a continuous street front that forms a strong block face. And the concerns here, additionally, is that the setbacks that are calculated as an average, not every lot has the same depth in the lot. So a setback that seems appropriate for a lot that's 200 feet deep. So that would be 306, 314, and 316. Those are very long, deep lots, whereas our current project site has been subdivided at some point in time previous to the owners acquiring of the site. So we are left with only 70 feet in which to build a structure. So as you can imagine, every feet counts in this case, and a typical setback that you might find in a deeper lot may not work on a much shallower lot. So if we go to the next slide. So here's a photo of that particular block. Our site 322 would be actually just in front of that black SUV you see in the photo. But as you can see, the homes here are very much abutting against the property lines in the street. And this block, as is the case in much of South Park neighborhood, is very intimately oriented towards the street. And this is the condition that we're trying to maintain with our new construction. And if we go to the next slide, we have 306 Bragg, which is kind of, I'll call it a problematic or rather non-conforming property, which is set back quite a bit from the street. And it's definitely an anomalous condition not found anywhere else on this block. So this is kind of the crux of the issue. And the 5.9 foot encroachment that we've proposed is not a random number. It's simply the calculation of the average setback that excludes this particular property. So in effect, what we're asking is that we are allowed to continue to use the NCOD rules just with the exception of, or just without including this non-conforming site in the calculation method. So next slide. So once again, this is a site plan facing north and 322 Bragg, measuring 70 by 30. Next slide. This would be the NCOD mandated 14.5 foot setback. Next slide. And that dotted section in the north of the site there, that's the amount of variance we're requesting, which leaves 8.6 feet of front setback. Next slide. And to move on to request 2 and 3, these are lines that depict where the other allowable encroachments would land if we were to move ahead with the variance. So on the left is sort of the as of right locations of where the bay and vestibule encroachment may be based on the primary setback and where the porch and step encroachment would be based on the primary setback. And I'll zoom in here if you go to the next slide. So in the new proposal and the variances that we're asking for, the new primary setback would move up 5.9 feet, and that's the red on the right side of the diagram. And along with that, we are requesting that the bay and vestibule encroachment move up 4 feet so that we can preserve the ability to create architectural features of that depth. And then the porch and step encroachment would move up 5.6 feet. It would move up 5.6 feet from the primary setback. And that number is slightly different only because we're trying to maintain the 3 foot clearance from the edge of the property line as stipulated in the UDO. So this would be the resulting condition that would in effect allow us to build a structure that mirrors the conditions in the block face that currently exist. I think that is the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McLemore, anything else from you?
Nothing further.
Okay. Board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Choi or Mr. McLemore? In this case? Okay. No one else signed up?
This is Mr. Mile. I had one question.
Please, go ahead.
Now, with the encroachment in terms of the way it looks, it's moving everything closer to the street. Is that not?
That is correct. Everything is becoming, moving closer to the street, yes.
So what, is there a safety concern there if that be the case? As soon as people step out of their home, they run right in the street?
The current fabric of that particular block exhibits that condition, and there is a little bit of buffer in that the right-of-way doesn't start until at least about 3 feet past all of the setbacks that we've just discussed. I think there's a 3 foot minimum setback that is required from any property line, so that we are preserving that buffer so that you don't walk out of your porch directly onto Bragg Street.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mile. I do have a question, and it probably speaks to my misunderstanding or lack of understanding about architectural features, but the bay and vestibule opportunity and the porch are added together, I'm trying to picture a situation where you would have both present. If you have a front porch across the house, I don't see why you would have a bay. So I'm trying to understand why we're getting credit for both of those distances. And maybe it's not possible without you showing me a drawing, but can you maybe explain that, Mr. Choi?
Yes, I think one clarification I'll make is that those two encroachments are sort of independent of each other. It's not on top of the bay encroachment. So in this particular drawing, if we go to the next slide, actually, which is zoomed in. So I guess I'll start with the standard encroachment on the left. The blue line is where one could project either a bay window or a vestibule that's no wider than 10 feet. You can project it up to 4 feet past the primary setback.
Right.
And then the green line is where you can project a porch or a entry step, that sort of thing, into the primary setback. So that's the green line there that's labeled 9 feet. So what they do, or the way they relate to the primary setback is independent of each other. It wouldn't be, like bay window, then the porch, but it would.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're not cumulative. Okay, thank you. I appreciate the clarification. Okay, any other board questions? No one? Okay, again, no one signed up in either support or opposition to speak on this. So any closing statements from the applicant? Nope. Anything else from Mr. Hodge?
No, sir.
Okay. In that case, let's close the evidentiary hearing and move to board deliberations. This is a variance. Entertain a motion.
This is Michael Rainey. I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Rainey. We have a motion to approve. We have a second.
Second, John Coons.
Mr. Coons, thank you. I have a motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion? Let's move to a roll call vote then, please.
Thank you. On the motion to approve, Mr. Rainey.
Approve.
Thank you. Mr. Coons.
Approve.
Thank you. Chairman Swink.
Approve.
Ms. Rudisill.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Mile.
Approve.
Thank you. That makes 5.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along, evidentiary hearing 4. It says 10608 and 10604 DeHuston Court, 11258 Raven Ridge Road. This is the Raven Ridge Development LLC property owner. This is a variance 78-2021. Mr. Hodge, I understand we have urban forestry staff available if we need them, but I'm going to ask you to make the presentation and then we'll see if we need to do a reaffirmation of the oath.
All right. Property owner Raven Ridge Development LLC requests a variance to Unified Development Ordinance Section 9.1.9.A.1, which requires that trees must either be preserved or planted as one contiguous area or scattered areas throughout the lot, but that no required tree area may be less than 1/5 of the total gross land area required to be set aside for trees. In order to designate forestation areas on the site, the applicant is proposing areas that are less than 1/5, or in this case, 1.23 acres of the required 6.16 acres of tree forestation in association with the construction of townhomes on a 20.22 acre assemblage of land. Properties located at 10608 and 10604 DeHuston Court and 11258 Raven Ridge Road. Here's an aerial showing the property today. There are a couple of homes, I believe, on 2 of these 3 parcels, but the majority, as you can see, is wooded today. It's located near the intersection of Falls of Neuse Road and Raven Ridge Road. In the bottom left, you can see that portion of a pond. That's the city's water treatment plant up in North Raleigh off Falls of the Neuse Road, just to better orient you to the site. In this image, north is to the right. Falls of the Neuse Road in this image is running left to right, but left in this image again would be south and right to the north. Again, it's a townhome development. They do propose tree conservation areas, but they do fall short of the city's minimum code requirements of 1/5 of the site area. Again, which would be 1.23 acre minimum parcel areas set aside for tree conservation. Happy to go into additional questions if the board has any at this time. Again, we do have Chris Crum, I believe, from the city's Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Forestry section, who administer the forestation and tree conservation regulations on the part of the city. So he is the subject matter expert if you had any particular questions on that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hodge. Mr. Crum, I'm going to reaffirm your oath because I do have a question for you, if I may. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You may need to unmute.
You?
That was an I do?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, looking at the site, the question is trees. So I was wondering if you had, I know you've looked at this, do you have any particular thoughts about the proposal as it is that would help us to understand if this is good, bad, or whatever?
So I hope everybody can hear me. My understanding based off of the variance request is that there's a request to reduce the size of the wooded areas. So wooded area requirement in 919 is a little different from the actual tree conservation areas. The wooded areas actually can be part of the land that's cleared and then replanted. So wanted to make that distinction where the tree conservation will be met in its entirety for the site. The wooded areas and size that's required for this particular development will be rather large because the parcels combined, as I understand it, are over 20 acres total. So that's why this request is being made. And I just wanted to make that distinction that these areas can be planted areas, not necessarily trees being preserved, although preserving trees also meets the requirement.
Right. Okay. Good. Thank you. Board members, any other questions for Mr. Crum or for Mr. Hodge? Mr. Koontz, did you have something? Good. Okay. Thank you. Okay, in that case, let's move along to the applicant, Worth Mills, Michael Birch, here representing the applicant. I'm not sure which of you or both of you may be speaking, but if you go ahead and take us through your case.
All right. Good afternoon, Chairman Swink, and members of the board. This is Worth Mills with Longleaf Law Partners, address 4509 Creedmoor Road, Suite 302, Raleigh, NC 27612. And before I begin, would just like to request that our application and the materials that we present today be entered into the record.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Also on the call is Jacob Anderson with Alliance Group NC to help answer any questions about the development generally. As Mr. Hodge mentioned, this is a request by Raven Ridge Development LLC who is seeking a variance to the urban watershed requirement that any tree forestation area be at least 1/5 of the total gross land area required to be set aside for trees. This variance would allow 5 forestation areas that are below the 1/5 minimum size to count towards the 40% forestation requirement, and that would result in more than 40% of the site being forested. Next slide, please. So again, just showing an aerial of the site here from IMAPS. As Mr. Hodge mentioned, there is
Van Horn. I called a couple of weeks ago about getting a variance for a piece of property in.
Excuse me, who's speaking?
Apologies. It looks like one of the attendees was unmuted, so I just muted
Okay.
them.
All right, thank you. Okay, I apologize for the interruption. Go ahead.
No worries, no worries. Just again, to give you an orientation of the site, it's primarily one large parcel at the corner of Raven Ridge Road and Falls News Road intersection with 2 smaller parcels to the east. These 3 properties were zoned planned development in February 2020, and they are also within the urban watershed district, which Mr. Hodgman stated requires at least 40% tree forestation with no area being less than 1/5 of that total area. Next slide, please. So this slide already shared as well, but it shows the proposed site layout with 136 condominium style townhomes, all of which would be located within that larger parcel with the Raven Ridge address. The 2 smaller parcels would house the stormwater pond and additional tree conservation area. If you can see next to the stormwater pond, the dotted line that runs along the length of said pond, that is an existing drainage easement. And that is one of the hardships that we are referencing, and one of the reasons that we were unable to connect some of the red shaded area in the left-hand side of the screen and have that connect and run around the stormwater pond and connect with that 1.39 acres of tree conservation area shown on the bottom of the screen. So just to give you an understanding of the legend here, the green dotted areas represent tree conservation area, which can count towards your forestation requirement if they are, again, 1/5 of the total size. This plan here shows 27.5% of the site to be dedicated as tree conservation area, whereas the UDO would only require 10% of this site be set aside for TCA. Those green lined areas represent tree forestation area that does not qualify as TCA, but that does qualify as forestation. And then those red areas, they represent areas that could otherwise count as forestation area, but again, do not comply with the 1/5 individual size minimum. And just looking at those individual areas, so in the left-hand side, you see 0.79 acres of tree conservation area, which again, due to its size, would not qualify for that 1/5. Immediately next to that is another 0.31 acres of what we would like to consider as tree forestation. Even when you combine those 2 areas, you are still below the 1.23 acre minimum size. Kind of moving again towards the north, we have additional proposed forestation areas that buffer the proposed townhomes to the adjacent residential uses. One is 0.26 acres, the other is 0.7. And then looking closer towards the intersection on either side of the row of, it would be easternmost townhomes, viewing it from true north, but there are 2.04 acre areas on either side that we would like to consider as forestation as well. Also want to note that this plan shows buffering between every home and right-of-way or adjacent residential property. So we will have TCA that runs along all of Falls of Neuse Road and all of Raven Ridge Road. And then we are proposing again forestation between the proposed townhomes and those residential units. And then lastly, another almost 1.4 acres of tree conservation area on one of the Dehi-Justein Court properties. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the topography of the site. You can see that this site slopes significantly away from Falls on Noose Road to the east and to the back of the development. This makes those back two parcels ideal for stormwater retention. And as I mentioned, one of the reasons that we can't fit additional TCA or forestation back there is because of that private drainage easement. And so just to run through the standards, and if you could go back one slide for me, please, that would be great. So unnecessary hardship would result in strict application of the ordinance by removing a significant number of townhomes from the proposed site layout. In order to meet the 40% forestation area through areas that are at least 1/5 of the total area, at least 10 townhomes would be lost. And the most ideal candidate would be in this area where you have the red TCA, the 0.79 and the 0.31 acres of forestation. If you were to, the way to remove or to make that compliant, unfortunately, would be to take out at least 10 of those townhomes. And so we feel that that is an unnecessary hardship given the amount of TCA and the amount of forestation that we are proposing to provide through this variance. The hardship results from the irregular shape of the assemblage coupled with the site's topography. The slope on the site requires that the stormwater pond be located towards the rear, which again is where we have a private drainage easement that prevents additional forestation from being designated along the stormwater control measure. And if you were to connect forestation there to what is shown closer to Raven Ridge Road, then we're in a situation where we meet the 1/5 total area and we're not before the board today. Again, this hardship is not caused by the owner's actions, but by the nature of the site itself, given the size, the slope, and the existing easements on the property. And finally, this request meets the spirit, purpose, and intent of the forestation ordinance by setting aside more total tree conservation area and tree forestation area than required. And it does so in a manner that effectively screens this development from adjacent residences. We appreciate your time this afternoon and hearing our case. Again, myself, Jacob Anderson, are on the line if you have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mills. Board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Mills? I have a question, and I think it's for our attorney, Ms. Hill. When we say that the hardship is not caused by the owner's actions, and in this particular case, proposing this number of townhouses, it sounds like, in a sense, that's a sort of a circular argument where it is actually, if they didn't propose so many townhomes, this would not be an issue. I'm trying to understand when that threshold of not caused by the owner's actions actually happens. Is this one you could explain?
I can try. One thing you have to, I'm trying to see, what is this property zoned? PD, okay. So part of your hardship analysis is what is a reasonable use of the property. And sometimes that has to do, what are all of the allowable uses on the property? If all they can do is a single family home, and you have some balancing that comes in with that. So just because they're proposing a variance to allow for more townhomes does not in and of itself mean that it's a self-created hardship. There's that balancing test about what is a reasonable use of the property. Self-created hardship is normally more direct. I've seen, property that's been subdivided in such a way that now it's by the property, they did something where they put themselves in a position where they couldn't comply. Right. But I do think it's a great question, and it comes down to that balancing test and what you think is an appropriate, or the board thinks is an appropriate and reasonable use of the property.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that helps. And again, I think the efforts to meet the forestation requirements are legitimate. So but I'm just trying to understand that little threshold, what triggers that. So thank you. Other board member questions? Anyone? Okay, we have no one sign up to speak in support. We do have an opponent signed up today, Novelet Judge. If you're with us, would you please state your address and your relationship to the case, and I will reaffirm your oath.
Chair Swink, this is Keegan McDonald, the moderator.
Yes, sir.
I am not seeing Novelet Judge listed on the attendee list.
Okay.
Perhaps they're logged in under a different name, and if so, they can feel free to send me a message, but again, not seeing them listed as an attendee.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's why I said if you're here, because I wasn't sure. So thank you for clarifying that. So in that case, again, board members, any other questions from you? Mr. Mills, anything you'd like to add in the way of closing statements?
Yes, sir, Mr. Swink. Thank you. Just on the question of self-created hardship, as Ms. Hill said, it is, a question in a manner of what is reasonable. I'll also note and give some additional context in terms of the zoning of this property. So this PD was approved in February of 2020. It was specifically to allow this type of layout shown, multiple times over to neighbors, to planning commission, city council, and the PD was essentially tied to this site plan, just to give a little bit more context as to, this particular layout.
Okay, good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, likewise, Mr. Hodge, any last words from you?
Only that Miss Judge lives across Raven Ridge, in the event that that's relevant, but in the proximity of where my cursor is pointing.
Right.
So they're not necessarily adjacent to the property. They are across Raven Ridge. I'm not sure why they're not on the line, but just wanted to point out where they reside.
Okay, I appreciate that. Hearing nothing further, let's close the evidentiary hearing and move to our deliberations and a possible motion. Anyone?
This is Ms. Mile. I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Mile. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Rudisill. We have a motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion? Let's move to a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. On the motion to approve, Mr. Mile.
Approve.
Thank you, Ms. Rudisill.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Coons.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Rainey.
Approve.
Thank you, Chairman Swink.
Approve.
Thank you. That makes 5.
Okay, thank you very much. Now let's move along to our next hearing, number 5. This is 3249 Blue Ridge Road, the Summit Church, Homestead Heights Baptist Church Incorporated property owner, variance 79-2021. Mr. Hodge.
The owners, the Summit Church, request a 0.5 acre variance to Unified Development Ordinance Section 9.1.3, which requires that properties 2 acres or greater dedicate at least 10% of its gross site area to be set aside as tree conservation area prior to subdivision approval, which would result in 0.89 acres of tree conservation if approved, in order to subdivide the 13.89 acre parcel. It is a split zoned piece of property, the right portion being R4 and the left or south western portion being office mixed use 3, parking limited, conditional use. There's an office building as well as the church property located on the right-hand portion of the property. And again, they're looking to subdivide the parcel in the lower south/western portion of the property. similar to where the zoning line is today for the OX3 PLCU. Again, this area in blue is what's up for subdivision. However, the acreage of the entirety of the parcel is what triggers the amount of tree conservation that would need to be included. Here's the subdivision plan and proposed tree conservation areas. I would note that in board docs, just prior to the beginning of this meeting, we did update the information there with some updated slides, which I believe are in this presentation, as well as a revised condition that has been reviewed by the city's forestry staff and city attorney's office. So that language is there in board docs as a new attachment. I believe it's called proposed condition and exhibit. If you all would like to have that at your avail when we get to that portion of the conversation. But similarly to this last matter, this is a tree conservation issue. Chris Crum, being the subject matter expert, can go into more detail regarding the requirement, the variance request, and if needed, the details of the proposed condition.
Okay, thank you.
Now that might be better left for once the applicant has presented.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Good guidance. Board members, any questions for Mr. Hodge? And we'll hold Mr. Crum in abeyance. Let us move now to Mr. Michael Birch or Worth Mills on this case. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Chairman Swink, this is Michael Birch. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Again, Chairman Swink, members of the Board of Adjustment, Michael Birch with Longleaf Law Partners here on behalf of the applicant. At this time, I would ask that our application and presentation materials be entered into the record.
Okay.
And if we could go to the next slide. So as Mr. Hodge alluded to, before I do that, let me make a few introductions. On the meeting with us today are a few folks. First, Patrick Faulkner with the Keith Corp, who is the contract purchaser of the 4-acre parcel that we'll be talking about. We also have Rick Baker, professional engineer, and Robert Wingate, professional engineer, both with the Timmons Group. And then also speaking in support of the variance will be Dave Wysachansky, the HOA president of the Edwards Mill Townhomes, which is one of the adjacent subdivisions to this site. So I will kind of handle the bulk of the presentation, see if anyone has any comments after that, and then turn it over to Dave. So as an overview, as Mr. Hodge mentioned, this request is for a variance to the tree conservation standards. It is associated with a 2-lot subdivision of property that is currently owned by the Summit Church. The purpose of the subdivision, as I'll show you, is to create a 4-acre parcel that they have under contract to sell to the Keith Corp for development of a medical office building. And this 4-acre portion of the property was just rezoned by City Council on November 2nd, 2021 to the OX district to allow for this medical office building. Although we are asking for a variance to the tree conservation requirements, we want to be clear that we are providing about 6.4% of the site area as code compliant tree conservation area. So as noted in bullet point 2 there, the code requires 10% of the gross site area as tree conservation. We are proposing code compliant 6.4% of the site as code compliant TCA. And then we are proposing another 6.1% of the site area through our condition of approval. That 6.1% of site area we'll show you on the exhibit are a couple of areas on the site that contain existing healthy trees that would otherwise qualify as tree conservation area, but for not meeting the minimum width that's in the code that's required of these tree conservation areas. So again, we'll kind of get into more detail, but just wanted to identify that on the front end. So with our condition of approval, we will be preserving existing trees for 12.5% of the site area. So that's kind of over and above that 10% code requirement. So if we could go to the next slide, this is an overview of the property highlighted in red there. So we are off Blue Ridge Road, kind of just north and east of the Rex Hospital kind of, campus, call it. And so this is very much in an area that is, continues to expand with medical office buildings. We could go to the next slide, and actually one more over before, and I'll come back to that. So just to give you a high level sense of where that 4-acre parcel would be, it is that area highlighted in blue. And so that blue area is called, let's call it 4 acres. And then the adjacent portion of the property that's largely developed with the church consists of about 9.9 acres of property. And so if we could go back one slide, I think it's important to note that the properties that we are trying to create existed as 2 separate parcels for a long time, up until 2005, when a prior owner of the church property recombined with that 4-acre parcel. I do want to note that no improvements have been made since that time. So it's not as if a predecessor in title has taken advantage of that additional property for some kind of development purpose. It was just recombined. No improvements were made pursuant to that recombination. And now the church is trying to reestablish that lot line to, again, create that 4-acre parcel to sell it for development of a medical office building. So if we can go forward one slide, again, kind of want to touch on the history of the property. So the buildings that you see on the, call it the old church property, the 9.9 acre portion of the property, those buildings and parking areas all existed prior to the recombination in 2005. Kind of the 2 buildings with the white roofs that you can see closest to Blue Ridge, those buildings were built actually in 1978, along with the parking areas kind of both beside it and to Blue Ridge Road. Now, the building behind it and the parking lot behind it, those improvements were made in 1997. So all of these improvements on the 9.9 acre property were made prior to the tree conservation area regulations. Those weren't adopted and imposed until 2005. When the predecessor church made the improvements in 1997, kind of for that new building and parking area, it removed, that was essentially all wooded area. And so it removed a significant number of trees that could otherwise have, if the tree conservation area regulations were in effect at that time, could have qualified for protection as tree conservation area. But of course, they weren't in effect at that time. So again, the property was recombined in 2005, but no substantial improvements have been made since then. But just the process of reestablishing that lot line, creating that 4-acre parcel in the way that it used to exist, does trigger now compliance with the tree conservation regulations. And so that is, again, kind of why we are here. You know, because of those improvements made prior to the TCA regulations, it really leaves very few trees on that 9.9 acre parcel. And essentially the vast majority of trees that would qualify for tree conservation are on that 4-acre parcel. And so that severely kind of overburdens that 4-acre parcel and significantly limits the ability for that 4-acre parcel to be developed. If we could go forward, let's see, one slide, that's perfect. As I'll kind of highlight in just a moment, some other impacts on the property. Actually, let's go forward one slide. Other things that have occurred with the property, other constraints on the property that affect the ability to comply with TCA include an existing sanitary sewer easement. Because that easement has been in place, we can't count that area towards tree conservation requirements. We also have a stream on the property. While we can count zone 2 of the riparian buffer, we're not able to count zone 1 of the riparian buffer towards meeting our tree conservation requirements. We can go one more slide. Another kind of big impact to the property's ability to comply with the tree conservation regulations involves when the adjacent townhome community was developed. That development and then kind of subsequent use by that townhome subdivision impacts about 0.3 acres of this site. For one reason or another, the adjacent townhome development impacted trees on this property, and then subsequently walking paths, trails, gazebos were put on this portion of the property as well, which has essentially eliminated our ability to count that area as tree conservation. So essentially kind of takes out of service 0.3 acres that might otherwise be able to qualify as tree conservation area. We could go one more slide and maybe one more. So this shows, and this is actually, after development of the actual townhomes, this just shows the installation of the paths and gazebos on the applicant's property. But even prior to that, there were trees in that area, but that area has since been kind of maintained, mowed, etc. And so we're not able to, we're not even able to replant and reestablish that area. So if we could go back 2 slides, maybe one more. So I want to highlight again, kind of the unnecessary hardship. So without a variance, that 4-acre portion of the property would be severely limited in terms of buildable area and could not be developed for the medical office building that was permitted, allowed by the rezoning that was approved by City Council in November of last year. The unnecessary hardship is a result of kind of things that are peculiar to the property: the sewer easement, the stream, the area impacted by the townhome encroachment, the timing of the improvements that were made on that church site, which essentially eliminated the ability to count hardly any of that property as compliant TCA area. And then the recombination with really no action after that. And so what that did is it essentially incorporated this area that is now without a variance, largely burdened and bears the large burden of compliance for this whole 13.89 acre tract. So all of the actions that have been mentioned are not actions of the owner, the current owner. And so on this last standard of consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance. So the intent of the tree conservation ordinance is to preserve tree coverage, especially in kind of appropriate areas like natural or environmental feature areas adjacent to existing development. The other intent is to lessen impact on surrounding development. So those are kind of tied together. So we are proposing a condition to designate additional areas that have existing healthy trees to essentially remain and where trees could not be removed. These areas are located along the stream. So again, kind of hitting that intent of preserving tree coverage in appropriate areas. They are also located along property line to the north, adjacent to the residentially zoned property, which includes a neighborhood and a church, as well as adjacent to the townhomes to the south. So let me highlight a couple of those areas. They're all designated in those green boxes as tree save variance areas. So on this slide, in these kind of purple, lined areas. So these areas don't qualify as code compliant TCA, but we are designating them and requiring, essentially saying that trees within these areas cannot be removed. So we're essentially trying to treat them as TCA areas. So here you have areas adjacent to the stream, both on, call it plan left and plan right. It's adjacent to the Noose riparian buffer and other tree conservation areas. So on this slide, you see that one kind of area that's highlighted in green, TCA 1, that's a code compliant TCA area. So we are trying to cluster and preserve a large stand of existing trees. We can go to the next slide. So again, this highlights that tree save variance area 3, which is kind of off screen that we just looked at near the creek and other TCA area, and it's also adjacent to another area that we are designating as code compliant tree conservation area, that TCA 2. It also provides a buffer to the adjacent townhomes to the south. We could go to the next slide. So this is the last of the the tree save variance areas. Again, tree survey on the property has been done. Within this area, you've got 230 trees that are in good health. We've identified the 2 unhealthy trees, the 3 dead trees. Of the healthy trees, the diameter breast height ranges from 3 inches to 34 inches. So there's some significant trees in this area that, with this condition of approval, would be preserved and would remain, could not be removed. And as you can see, this area is adjacent to home, kind of on plan left, as well as the church on plan right. So we think these areas meet the intent of the tree conservation ordinance, given they have healthy trees, existing tree coverage, located in kind of the appropriate places to lessen impact on surrounding development. I also want to note, while it's not directly related, through the rezoning process, we obviously engaged very meaningfully with all of our neighbors, particularly the adjacent townhomes. And so the rezoning conditions itself that apply to this 4-acre area limit the impact of development by limiting hours of operation of that medical office use, requiring a minimum setback of 100 feet, limiting height limiting lighting, requiring a buffer, and again, if we didn't designate an area TCA. And so all of this is compliant with that as well. If we could go back to just kind of the large exhibit. Want to reemphasize that with this condition of approval, we are providing protecting trees for 12.5% of the gross site area that is over and above the code requirement for tree conservation. And that these areas would otherwise comply, but for kind of not meeting the minimum dimension standards in the code. But as you can see, they're adjacent to qualifying areas and supplement these well. So with that, certainly want to ask for the board's support of this variance request. Also want to ask for the board to, if there aren't any questions immediately, to recognize Dave Wysochansky so that he can provide some comment to the board as well.
Okay, well, let's take Mr. Wysochansky here because there may be some questions. If you would please, just for the record and to be sure we get it right, state your name, your address, and your relationship to the case, and I will reaffirm your oath.
Is Dave Wysochansky, and I live at 4011 Baileyfield Drive, and I'm the president of the Edwards Mill Townhomes HOA.
Okay, great. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm the HOA president at Edwards Mill Townhomes, which borders the reference 4-acre area. The developer, Patrick Faulkner, and his team have been in touch with us through the rezoning process, which completed last year. They shared with us elements of their site plan, which included the tree conservation areas and other areas where they do not intend to cut trees and grade along the line with the townhomes. We believe these areas, so long as they are preserved around the perimeter of the site, are an adequate buffer between the townhomes and the proposed development, and we support the variance request. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, board members, we have some questions for Mr. Birch or for Mr. Wysochansky. Mr. Birch, I just want to be clear regarding the tree save variance areas. It's hard with skipping back and forth to tell exactly where they all are, but it appears that some of those are not on the subject property. They're part of the larger parcel, but they're not on the subject property. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, Chairman Swink, you understand that correctly. And so, and that has kind of been call it the issue all along, is trying to almost kind of balance the burden on the 4-acre parcel relative to the whole 13.89 acres. And so the pink areas that you see, yes, the majority of those are on the, call it the old church property. However, I do want to note that the tree conservation area that is being provided on the 4-acre parcel, that does exceed the, that does exceed the, call it 10% requirement. So that area is 0.5, a little over 0.5 acres. And so on a 4-acre site, your requirement of 10% would be 0.4. So actual tree conservation, like code compliant tree conservation area, we are providing more than 10% on that 4-acre site, plus a little extra, call it tree save variance area. You can see that small purple portion there next to it.
Okay. And in other cases, we've talked about when conditions apply to different parcels, the city's ability to monitor and stay on top of that. I'm assuming, since this has been talked through with staff, we should have no concerns about the ability of what I'm saying here is the northern parcel to actually maintain those tree save areas? Will the city will not be coming back to look at that from time to time? What's the deal on that?
Yeah, so this is Michael. I'll touch on it first, and if Ms. Hill or some other city staff member wants to touch on it, they're happy to as well. So the subdivision has not yet been approved or recorded. And so this variance is kind of a necessary precondition to that. And so there will be, kind of notes on recorded documents that the property is subject to this variance, the conditions of approval of this variance, and any, call it violation of this variance is treated like a zoning violation. And so I think my understanding is the city felt comfortable that one, subsequent owners would be on notice, and then two, the city also had an enforcement, mechanism to ensure compliance. But again, I'll defer to city staff on their opinion as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's all the variance, the property that the variance is applying to is the large. It hasn't been subdivided as Mr. Birch just stated. So I don't have any legal concerns with the condition because the property under consideration is the larger property. And so as Mr. Birch just, staff can probably jump in on that second part about, as it goes through subdivision and site plan and all of that variance, if granted and conditions, if imposed, would all carry through the review process.
Yeah, this is Eric Hodge. Furthermore, even if they were proposing code compliant tree conservation areas, theoretically, they could all land on that northern parcel. And so it's the subdivision that has to carry the weight of the requirement, and that need not be proportionate on each lot throughout a subdivision. So it's not unusual for one lot to bear more of the brunt of tree conservation to support an overall subdivision. So sometimes subsequent lots that are part of subdivisions don't have any tree conservation, but others continue to carry that responsibility in perpetuity.
Great, got it. Super, thank you. Thank you all for explaining that. Board members, any other questions for the applicant? Okay, well, no one else signed up to speak either in support or opposition. So, Mr. Birch, any last word from you?
No, sir. We appreciate the board's consideration of this. Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Hodge, I'll give you the opportunity. Anything else?
Nothing else from me at this time. Thanks.
Okay. Hearing no board questions, I'm going to close the evidentiary hearing and move to our deliberations. And I'll just open it by saying, as you were presenting this, I was thinking, wouldn't it be great if the bigger parcel could continue to carry some of that burden? I didn't understand exactly the way this was being framed. So I was delighted when you actually started proposing that. So that makes me happy. You know about trees. I'm always going to say something about that. So I'm pleased with the effort to make this work. I understand there was a condition. Mr. Puccini or Ms. Hill, do y'all have the language of that condition, or do we need to have someone state it?
I do, and I can read it into the record. I'm also wondering, Eric, if you have it and can pull it up on the screen, there's language and it has a coordinating image.
Yeah, let me pull that up. Hold on just a moment.
That might make it
Is that large enough? I can
A
zoom
little
in.
larger, please.
And then do you have it references the February 10th exhibit. Do you have that as well that you can toggle? Perfect.
I do.
There you go.
So do you want the condition or the?
Yeah, there you go. So here's the language. We can read it into the record since it's just shown on the screen, but it's that the property owner shall provide at least 6.4% gross site area of UDA compliant tree conservation area. And then in lieu of having to designate as tree conservation area, other portions of the property that might otherwise qualify as UDO compliant tree conservation areas, the property owner shall not remove existing trees within those areas identified as, then it's tree save variance area 1, 2, 3, and 4. On the attached exhibit titled Blue Ridge Road Tree Survey Exhibit dated February 10th, 2022, prepared by Timmons Group. However, trees within these tree save variance areas that are unhealthy, dead, or diseased may be removed. The amount of UDO compliant tree conservation areas plus the amount of tree save variance areas shall total at least 12.5% gross site area of the property. Then if you scroll down to the image, you can see what those variants, tree save area variance 1, tree save area variance area 2, tree save variance area 3, and tree save variance area 4. And those are the 4 that Mr. Birch just walked through this exhibit.
Great. Super. Thank you.
We'll email that to you as Mr. Puccini to make sure you have it.
I was about to make sure, because I want to make sure I have the exhibit. Will also be included in the minutes. I'll make sure it's in color so everybody can understand what's what.
Great.
Perfect.
Very good. Well, with that, I'm going to move this along by moving that we approve this with the condition that's been offered. So I move approval with the condition as offered. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Mile, thank you for that second. Anyone else further discussion? Then let's move to a roll call vote, please.
On the motion to approve, Chairman Swink,
Approve?
Secretary Mile,
Approve.
Vice Chairman Kuntz.
Approve.
Thank you. Ms. Rudisil.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Rainey.
Approve.
Thank you. That makes 5.
Okay, great. We've been at it 2 hours. I'm going to call a brief recess. We're going to come back at 3:10, and we will move into our next evidentiary hearing, item 6. So we're going to take a recess right now, come back at 3:10. 6, 703 Chamberlain Street. Jack and Linda Kimball are the property owners. This is variance 80-2021. And Justin Booker is our planner presenter today. Mr. Booker, let me reaffirm your oath. You swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do, yes.
Thank you. Well, go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you very much. I think I just need the presenter privilege, so if the host could pass me that, I will begin my presentation. Keegan, if you could pass me the presentation ability, if you are there.
Keegan, can you confirm you're with us?
Oh, there we go. All right, now I've got
I
it.
just moved it.
Oh, thank you, Eric. All right, so good afternoon. The next case is BOA 0080-2021. This is located at 703 Chamberlain Street. Jack and Linda Kimball, the property owners, are requesting a 30-foot variance to the required 45.9 to 56.1 foot front yard setback range, which would result in a 20-foot front yard setback, as set forth in UDO section 5.4.3.F.15.D. So this section of the UDO requires the front yard setback to be within 10% of the median front yard setback established by buildings on the same side of the block face of the proposed building. And this is in association with the construction of a detached house. And it is zoned R6, also within the Special Residential Parking Overlay District and the Oberlin Village Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District. So you can see the lot here is in red. It is a 0.15 acre lot. And here's just a closer aerial. And you can see here from the building footprints, the sample from which the front yard setback range is derived is pretty small. So if you recall, that front yard setback is to be within 10% of the median front yard setback established by buildings on the same side of the block face of the proposed building. So that's along Chamberlain Street. So you can see here the sample of buildings that front Chamberlain Street is pretty small. And here is the applicant provided plot plan. North is shown plan east. So the front of the lawn of the lot is shown at the south of this, or towards the bottom of this picture. I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I can hand it back over to the applicant for their presentation.
Okay, thank you. Board members, questions for Mr. Booker? Okay, let's move along to the applicants. Again, we have Worth Mills and/or Michael Birch presenting. Which of you guys is going to do the presentation?
Yeah. Good afternoon, Chairman Swink and members of the board. This is Worth Mills. I'll be leading this presentation. So again, I'll give my address, 4509 Creedmoor Road, Suite 302, Raleigh, NC 27612. And I'll ask that our application and presentation materials be submitted into the record this afternoon.
Okay.
And again, here on behalf of Jack and Linda Kimball, the property owners of 703 Chamberlain Street, this variance to the Oberlin Village setback requirement would permit Mr. and Mrs. Kimball to construct a new home with a similar front yard setback to the previous home and others within the Oberlin Village District. Next slide, please. And I'll also note that I have Lane Miller, architect, on the call as well to answer any questions about the proposed plot plan. So here's an aerial view of the 0.15 acre lot with the previous home still shown. That previous one-story home was originally built in 1926. It was recently demolished approximately 2 weeks ago. I would have you note its proximity to Chamberlain Street and its large rear yard. This is common of other adjacent homes as well in the surrounding area. And I'll also note that the home sharing a rear boundary line with 703 Chamberlain Street just to our left, 2506 Mayview Road, received a variance for a 14-foot front yard setback in 2018. And in their case, they cited the property with the address 2403 Kilgore Avenue, which is just a couple blocks down, as a precedent for theirs. So I say all that to say that this is not an uncommon request within the Oberlin Village district when you're taking a small number of sample sizes to find your median setback. Next slide, please. And then again, here's a street view of that previous home. It was a modest one-story bungalow that was commonplace within Oberlin Village in the 1920s. And here again, you can see just how close the original home was to Chamberlain Street. Next slide, please. And then lastly here, you can see once more the relation of this previous home to the lot in Chamberlain Street. From the edge of the front porch, that previous home was less than 10 feet from the street. We are asking for a variance in order to locate a new home within 20 feet of the Chamberlain Street right-of-way. Next slide, please. So this slide identifies the available homes from which we collected our median setback. So the Oberlin Village Overlay District requires the front yard setback for new homes be within 10% of the median front yard setback established by buildings on the same side of the block face of the proposed building. And so we have three properties here, 719 Chamberlain, which is the most north. That was built in 1950, and that's approximately 55 feet from Chamberlain Street. Moving south, we have 717 Chamberlain Street, which was built in 1949. That home's approximately 45 feet from Chamberlain Street. And then lastly, we have 707 Chamberlain, which was built in 2016, subject to these overlay front yard setback rules. And that home's approximately 15 feet from Chamberlain Street. So just to say, as you see these newer homes that are being built and old homes being torn down, you are again seeing these homes be located closer to Chamberlain, just as we're asking to do here. Next slide, please. So again, this slide shows a proposed floor plan with Chamberlain Street on the right-hand side, the rear yard on the left-hand side. Apologies for those inverted measurements here, but I will read off the relevant ones. So you can see a two-car garage on the northern part of the lot, which is approximately 20 feet from Chamberlain Street. And that leaves us approximately 23 to 24 feet of depth for a rear yard. Now, the minimum rear yard setback for an R6 property is 20 feet. So we couldn't go much closer, in terms of the home to the rear yard boundary line as we are today. If we were going to abide by the setback range that is dictated by the three properties to our north, this entire floor plan would be significantly reduced. We really can't go any further back to our rear yard without having to obtain a variance to that UDO provision. And so you're looking at, losing approximately 25 to 30 feet of this building footprint by abiding by that 45 to 50 foot setback as required under the Oberlin Village Overlay District. Next slide, please. So this next slide is the style that Mr. and Mrs. Kimball intend to build on the lot. It's a one-story modest ranch, very similar, at least in terms of size, to previous homes and existing homes within this neighborhood. Next slide. And then lastly, you can see this is a less detailed building footprint and how this building fits within the lot. Again, that 20-foot rear yard is the closest that the UDO will permit a new home under this R6 zoning. And so, we've got the 20-foot rear yard setback squeezing us on the backside and what could be a 45 to 50-foot front yard setback from Chamberlain Street, which leaves you with very little buildable space for a new home. Next slide. So this slide shows, as best as I could, kind of the boundaries of the Oberlin Village district. It's bounded by Sonora Street to the north, Clark Avenue to the south. It's primarily all west of Oberlin Road, save for 2 properties there to the north. The Raleigh Historic Development Commission issues a report for each historic district within the city. And when it described the street side character of Oberlin Village, it said that it is comprised of a mix of small shotguns, tri-gable houses, and bungalows with small front yards set close to the street. So again, just want to affirm that what we are proposing is consistent both with the historical character of the Oberlin Village District, as well as what the 10% medium front yard setback is trying to accomplish, save for, the 3 properties that we're having to take as our sample, which are much further back than many other homes within this district. Next slide. And here I'll just kind of, show different parts of the district, and you can see here these homes along Van Dyke Avenue. Again, many of them are close to the front yard, close to the right of way with ample rear yards. Next slide. And then here on Kilgore Avenue and Bedford Avenue, just more evidence that locating a home within 20 feet of the right of way is common within this neighborhood overlay district. And just to run through the variance standards, strict application of the setback rule would require that this building be set back 25 to 30 feet farther from Chamberlain Street, which would significantly reduce the square footage that could fit within this lot, or in the alternative, you're pushing the building right up to the rear boundary line and, in some ways invading the privacy of your neighbors. The hardship results from the lack of available properties from which to gather a median setback, and those properties that we do have do not necessarily reflect the historic street side character of Oberlin Village. The hardship is not created by the property owner's actions, and this variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the overlay's front setback ordinance, because it proposes to construct a new home that is comparable to the previous home built in 1926 and to those other historical homes within Oberlin Village. That concludes our presentation. Lane Miller, myself, we're available if you have any questions, and we appreciate your time this afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mills. Board members, do you have any questions? Okay, no one signed up to speak in support or opposition to this case. I think we just heard from the applicant. Mr. Booker, anything else from you?
No, sir.
Okay, board, last chance. All right, let's close the evidentiary hearing and move on to our board deliberations. Glad to have a motion.
This is John Coons. I think it's pretty consistent, and we'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Coons. We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll make a second.
Mr. Mile, you just got in under the wire there. Thank you very much. A motion to approve in a second. Any further discussion? And let us move to our roll call vote.
Thank you. On the motion to approve, Mr. Coons?
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Mile.
Approve.
Thank you, Chairman Swink.
Approve.
Thank you, Ms. Rudisill.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Rainey.
Approve.
Thank you. It makes 5.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, evidentiary hearing 7. This is 3405 Rock Quarry Road. AV Ventures NC LLC is the property owner. This is a special use permit case, BOA 0081-2021. Mr. Booker, I believe it's yours to present.
Thank you. Yes, AV Ventures NC LLC, the property owner, is requesting a special use permit pursuant to UDO sections 6.2.3.d and 10.2.9. This is for a special care facility located at 3405 Rock Quarry Road. A special care facility is defined by our ordinance as a facility which provides psychosocial rehabilitation, skill development activities, educational services, and pre-vocational training and transitional and supported employment services to individuals with severe and persistent mental illness. Can include a rehabilitative clinic and adult rehabilitation center. Just to provide some context, you can see the subject property here outlined in red. It's located just southeast of where 440 and 440 meet. And then it is shown here also in red. It is a 2.88 acre lot, zoned R6, located within the Special Highway Overlay District. And shown here is the applicant provided plot plan. Happy to answer any questions now. Otherwise, I can hand it over to the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Board members, questions? Okay, let's move along. Crystal Redding is the attorney representing the applicant. Let me remind you that any witnesses you call must reaffirm their oath on the record before testifying, but please present your case.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me fine?
We can.
Thank you. Greetings to the board and Chair Swink, and I appreciate the introduction, Mr. Booker. My name is Attorney Crystal Redding. I represent AV Ventures NC LLC, who is the applicant in this matter. And this is a special use permit application for the proposed use location at 3405 Rock Quarry Road in Raleigh. I would also like to take this moment to thank Mr. Eric Hodge and Mr. Justin Booker and Attorney Catherine Hill for their assistance throughout this process. I would ask that the application materials and exhibits be made part of the record, please.
Okay.
And Chair Swink, we have witnesses today that would include Mr. Michael Artis, who is the architectural engineer and a professional engineer for this subject property and the project.
Ms. Redding, excuse me for just a minute.
Yes.
Mr. Brasini is raising his hand. Do you have a question?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Redding, would you please give me your address, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's 4600 Marriott Drive, Suite 200, Raleigh, North Carolina.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I apologize.
No, I missed that myself. So thank you for jumping in there. So go ahead. You were about to talk about your potential witnesses.
Yes, sir. We have today Mr. Michael Artis, who is a professional engineer and the architectural engineer for this subject project. We also have Mr. Antoine Yelverton. He is operating in a dual role today, sir. He is a member of AV Ventures NC LLC, which is the applicant, but he is also the finance director for Yelverton's Enrichment Services Incorporated, which has a contract with AV Ventures NC LLC to provide the mental health services for the special care facility that is the subject of this application. And we also have Miss Vicki Yelverton. She is going to be operating in a dual capacity today before the board. She is a member of AV Ventures NC LLC, but she is also a corporate officer for Yelverton's Enrichment Services, Inc., that is providing the mental health services for this special care facility. We might also have Ms. Sherry Campbell if the board has questions of Ms. Campbell. She is a staff member with Yelverton Enrichment Services, Inc. And we also have another witness who has signed up to in support of this application.
Okay. Now, before we go further, are the first three you mentioned, are they definitely going to testify, in which case I want to reaffirm their oath, or do you want to, we'll just see if it comes up? What's your request?
Thank you. All three of those witnesses are definitely on the schedule to testify today.
Okay, then let me go ahead and reaffirm the oath, starting with Vicki Yelverton. If you would please state your address and your relation, even though she just said it, state your relationship to the case and let me reaffirm your oath.
Yes, sir. Great afternoon. Vicki Smith Yelverton. I am the CEO and also act in the corporate capacity for the Yelverton Enrichment Services Agency, as well as part of AV Ventures of North Carolina, LLC. And the address, as far as our business location, is 4805 Green Road, Suite 103, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27616.
Okay, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Antoine Yelverton, likewise, if you would please state your address and your relationship to the case.
Yes, Antoine Yelverton, members of AV Ventures, NC LLC. Address is 4805 Green Road, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27616.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, and then Michael Artis, again, if you the same.
Yes, sir. Michael Artis. Like I said, I'm the architectural engineer and lead designer for the project. My current address is 310 Boston Post Road in Waterford, Connecticut, 06385. Originally from North Carolina, just so you know. I'm back. These are my roots here, so I'm very excited about this project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Artis. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and Ms. Redding, I'm going to hold off on Ms. Wrighton and I'm not sure, you didn't mention your other person, Ms. Campbell. I'll hold off on that, subject to your calling them if you need to.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you. This is special use permit application BOA 0081-2021, and I represent AV Ventures NC LLC, who is the owner of the project and the applicant. And the subject property location is 3405 Rock Quarry Road in Raleigh. And the first slide you see before you is a rendering of the project. And again, our engineer, Mr. Artis, is the designer. You can see based on this rendering that the property is flanked by Redeeming Love Missionary Baptist Church with natural barrier buffers of trees. There's also a football field there, parking, and additional natural barriers surrounding this property. We're very excited about this project. What will be named the Yes Center is going to be actually a combination of services. There'll be mental health, behavioral health services, which Ms. Vicki Yelverton and Mr. Antoine Yelverton will describe in more detail later in the presentation. But it's also going to be combined with a sports enrichment element. And that is the reason for the football field. And on the interior of this structure are also a 2-layer basketball courts. And Ms. Vicki Yelverton will explain how the sports enrichment services actually combined with the behavioral health and mental health is of great benefit to the participants in these programs and how beneficial this particular special care facility will be for this community and the surrounding area. Next slide, please. This slide shows the site layout plan for the project. And Mr. Artis will go into a lot more detail about this later on in the presentation, but we just wanted you to see what the basic layout of the site is. Next slide, please. I'm going to give just a general overview of the UDO and how the regulations are related to this project and how our request falls within these regulations. So Chapter 6 use regulations are the most relevant articles for our consideration today, and that is from Article 6.1. Section 6.1.1.b. The allowed principal uses by district are listed in section 6.1.4, and we've talked about the location of the property. This property is located in residential district R6, and the facility planned at this location is a special care facility. Next slide, please. In section 6.1.4, this is the allowed principal use table, and it designates that a special care facility is allowed in R6, but it requires the special use permit. And the application for this permit was timely filed for purposes of this hearing. Next slide, please. We also wanted to point out that section 6.1.5 lists the prohibited uses that would be in this area, and none of the uses that are planned for this special care facility fall within any of these prohibited uses. And just some of those are listed there. We're not going to have a manufactured home or open dump or school administrative personnel offices, and a sign not explicitly allowed in the zoning district. None of these uses are what is planned for this particular facility. Next slide, please. This proposed use, as I've stated previously, is allowable for R6 as a special care facility. And section 6.2.3.d.1 defines what a special care facility is. And Mr. Booker was kind enough to read those particular services. And those are the services that will be provided by Yes Enrichment Services, the Yelverton's Enrichment Services, Inc. And also additional services to be provided will include social and emotional rehabilitation, educational support services, and mental health management through the use of physical wellness training to children and adolescents who live with severe and persistent mental illness. We would like to point out, because sometimes there is a bit of confusion regarding what kind of services this will be and what kind of facility this will be. This is not a group home, and there will be no overnight services offered at this facility. All of these programs are day treatment programs. At this time, Chair Swink, if you would allow Mr. Antoine Yelverton to testify regarding the Yelverton's Enrichment Services Company, so that the board will have some background on their particular services, and to describe some of those services in a bit more detail.
Okay, Mr. Yelverton.
Mr. Yelverton, if you would, you've already stated your name and your business address, but would you please describe your education and your experience in mental health services?
Yes, thank you, Attorney Crystal. My educational background, I have a master's in business administration from East Carolina University. I also have a bachelor's degree in economics. We've been providing services under Yelverton's Enrichment Services for over 15 years that are catered to the children and adolescent population. The services that you see on your right-hand side, most of those are called outpatient-based services. A treatment service is the only site-specific service that we.
And what is your position with Yelverton's Enrichment Services, Inc.?
Director of Finance and one of the proud owners.
Okay, and Chair Swink, if we would like to tender Mr. Yelverton as an expert in the area of mental health provisional services.
Okay.
Mr. Yelverton, can you describe a little bit more detail about the treatment services offered to adolescents through Yes, Inc.?
Sure, sure. And Vicki Yelverton will share some of this as well. But again, we've been serving populations for over 15 years. We're contracted by the state and managed care organizations in the state to provide these services. We can cover close to 20 to 30 counties. Wake County, Durham are our primary areas that we serve. We are contracted with the public school systems such as Wake County Public Schools, Durham County Public Schools, and some other affiliations that we have that you'll see on the later slides. But the premises of the services that we offer are children that are at risk of being out of placement, or they're having some behavioral issues in their natural school setting.
Thank you. And can you describe in a bit more detail for the board how physical wellness training will be incorporated into these treatment plans for the adolescents, and how the special care facility will offer those services?
Sure, sure. I guess it's proven statistic if a child age group that we serve have a recreational outing, the services are proven to be more effective. The idea that we have now with this project is going to transition to a new site that will be a lot different than what we have now. Currently in Raleigh, we do have a day treatment center that's in the north side of town, and it's just your traditional building with classrooms. A lot of times we have to affiliate with different recreational entities to accommodate that recreational resource, that sports outsource source for the child. So looking at this model, it will help with having those options under one roof. And again, it's proven that it'll be a worthwhile outcome for our kids to serve.
Thank you, Mr. Yelverton. Chair Swink, I would like, if you don't have any questions of Mr. Yelverton at this time, I would like to call Ms. Vicki Yelverton to testify regarding the services that you see on the right hand of the screen on this slide, and to describe the positive correlation between mental health and physical activity that will be part of the services offered.
Okay, go ahead.
Ms. Vicki Yelverton, please.
Yes, ma'am. Greetings, everyone.
You've already stated your name and business address. Would you please describe for the board your education and experience?
Sure. I have a master's in social work, and I'm also currently a licensed clinical social work associate.
All right. And what is your position with Yes, Inc.?
I'm the CEO as well as our training and quality assurance director.
Great. And your certifications include mental health support services, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, correct.
Would Chair Swink, I would like to offer Ms. Yelverton as an expert witness for today's purposes.
Okay.
Ms. Yelverton, would you please describe the services that are listed on the right hand of the screen and how they fall within the definition of the services that are allowed for a special care facility under the zoning ordinances that we are talking about today, please?
Yes, ma'am. As we successfully serve the severe and persistent mentally ill, we can provide the following services such as assessments. That's where we'll do a comprehensive clinical assessment to determine the clinical need for the member or for the participant. We also offer medication management. That is an individual who may need a level of medication to help support them in their mental wellness journey. We provide telepsychiatry, and this is allotted under a virtual platform. And especially with the pandemic, that has been a very popular form of treatment. We provide outpatient and outpatient plus. This is where we have a clinician that provides a level of support to the member, whether it be weekly, once a month, it may be on site at the office location, or it may be in the convenience of their home, or also again, virtually. We provide school-based therapy where we have clinicians that go on site at the respective school location and provide school therapy or OPT therapy to the students during their elective classes. We also provide intensive in-home supports, and that is where we provide supports in the recipient or participant's home or in the community. And then we also offer day treatment for the use of this location. That is a on-site facility-based program. It is a day program. There is no overnight stay. And this is where we treat the student for anywhere from 3 hours to 5 hours at a time. And that is where they may be on a full day schedule with our day treatment program, on modified day, where we partner with the local school to provide them a level of instruction there at the school setting, and then they would come to our facility for the mental wellness program. We also cater other services and supports as clinically necessary and deemed in their comprehensive clinical assessment.
Okay, thank you. And those services that are being provided by Yes Inc., do those fall within the definition of special care facility that was read earlier in this presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. Ms. Yelverton, will you please describe the positive correlation between mental health and physical activity?
Yes, ma'am. So as the slide reads, YES provides a comprehensive day treatment program that serves the whole student to include mind and body. Understanding the positive correlation between mental health and physical wellness remains key in addressing, stabilizing, and managing mental health symptoms among children and adolescents. There has been a study conducted by Dr. An and Dr. Fidewa back in 2011 that examined the effect of children's physical activity on their mental health outcomes. And as predicted, increased levels of physical activity had significant effects in reducing depression, anxiety, psychological distress, and emotional disturbances in children.
And would the granting of a special use permit in this area for this particular structure allow your company to provide the services for the clientele that you serve?
Yes, ma'am. And with the space that would be allotted for us to enhance and integrate the mental wellness as well as the physical health, that will allow us to continue to increase and provide outcomes and data to further support the correlation between the two, the positive correlation between the two.
And who are your clientele primarily?
You have your children as young as age 5, and they go on up to age 18 that are students in the Wake County Public School System. They may be part of the charter school system. They may be part of the private school system that have their mental wellness diagnosis that would indicate anything such as ADD or ADHD. You may have some oppositional defiant disorders. Different variables or different variances of mental wellness are the types of students that we would serve. Any of the students that attend these public school entities or private school entities, those are the members that we can serve.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. This slide describes some of the team members for Yelverton's Enrichment Services. They have staff of their own. However, they are also affiliated with several other types of mental health service professionals. I would like for Mr. Yelverton to describe some of the affiliations that are listed on this slide and the next one.
Yes. So, what you see here, guys, are the level of clinicians that we have that serve not only for the subject property or project, but they are most of our outpatient based level clinicians. I think we have close to maybe 100, 150 clinicians that will not be employed specifically from this location, but they serve pretty much all of our outpatient based locations. We are corporate here in Raleigh, North Carolina, but we also have 5 other satellite offices where these professionals are employed.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Can you describe some of the affiliations with Yelverton's enrichment services that would be utilized to hone in on and to help provide the services that you've been describing so far?
Sure. So what you see here are some of the affiliations that we have in the communities, basically serving as referral sources for our program. We are currently contracted, as I mentioned, with several managed care organizations, the Department of Human Health Services, and also the public school systems, as you see. For example, Durham County Public Schools, Wake County Public Schools, Wayne County. Some of the sport affiliations that we have with the youth can participate in are listed as well. We have the National Soccer League Associations, we have track, basketball, we have football, list goes on. These are all entities that have shown a major interest in collaborating with us with this project.
Thank you. Chair Swink, you'll notice on this slide that Ms. Tiki Wrighton is listed as one of the witnesses. She is the Dean of Intervention and Special Education at Preeminent Charter School. I believe she signed up actually as a supporter of the application, and we can hear from her at your pleasure, sir.
Okay, thank you. We'll hold her for the time being.
Thank you. Next slide, please. To get deeper into the proposed use plan facility of special care facility, we are looking at section 6.2.3.d.1, which includes the use standards for a special care facility. And our special care facility that is planned does meet these use standards. At the time of this application, there was no other special care facility located within 1,200 feet of another special care facility at the location. The proposed use special care facility at the location that's been talked about is an R6 residential district. The minimum lot area pursuant to section 6.2.3.d.2b is 640 square feet. The lot size for 3405 Rock Quarry Road is 2.88 acres, which equals 125,452.8 square feet, which is well above the minimum lot area that is required. Also, for this facility, there will only be one unlit announcement sign designed for this facility, which will not exceed 2 square feet in area and 3.5 feet in height. Additionally, there will only be one vehicle that is used in connection with this special care facility that will be parked or stored on the premises or on the residential street. Next slide, please. We also have proposed uses for this special care facility that is compatible with adjacent uses in terms of location, scale, site design, hours of operation, and operating characteristics. And some of this information, Chair Swink, will be talked about in more detail by Mr. Michael Artis, who is the architectural engineer for this project, and Ms. Vicki Yelverton will discuss in more detail the operating hours and how those will not have a negative impact on this area. So this proposed use does provide a venue for the mental health and wellness and athletic and educational support for area youth, as we have discussed. There will be screening and landscaping for required buffers for separation from adjacent landowners. The scale and site design ensures compatibility with the surrounding community. And I would like for Mr. Michael Artis to talk about those matters in a bit more detail, please. And I'd like to call him as a witness at this time, Chair Swink.
Okay, go ahead.
Good evening. Could you please give me the slide with the picture or plan on it, please? Okay.
And while we're getting to that point, Mr. Artis, you've already stated your name and your address. Please
Yeah.
describe your educational engineering background and experience.
Okay, I'm a graduate of North Carolina A&T State Architectural Engineering program back in the 80s. I've been out of that since the early 80s, and been out in the field in the private and the public sector. I have my own architectural engineering firm, Artist Associates, and I've been in business for about over 30 years. And during that period of time, I have designed.
I'm sorry, Mr. Artist, I didn't mean to talk over you. I wanted to be sure that the board knows exactly probably what you're getting ready to say, and that was some of your work in the public and private sector.
Oh yes, yes. I started my career working for a large engineering corporation, Stone and Webster Engineering Corporation. And then I went on to work, do a 30-year career with the U.S. Navy as a civilian employee. Became the director of engineering at one of their base facilities. And like I said, I have my own architectural engineering firm, currently located in Connecticut, but I worked in North Carolina and in Connecticut for over 30 years. So I've designed well over 100 facilities throughout that period.
Thank you. Can you please describe the screening and landscaping and required buffers for separation from adjacent landowners and the scale and site design that will ensure compatibility with the surrounding community for this facility?
Yes. Could I get them to go back to the first slide? And I think it would be a lot easier for me to explain from that slide, if you don't mind.
That would be one slide back.
It's the very first slide. The very first slide. Okay, yeah. I think if you got a visual of it, you'll more easily understand what I'm trying to say to you. Just to orientate you, you are currently looking north at the site. As the gentleman previously stated, we have a 2.88 acre site, roughly 220 feet wide and about 510 feet deep. The building that you see, that is the proposed Yes Center. The lower building section is the administrative section of the building, whereby you have classrooms, therapy rooms, locker rooms, handicap bathroom. The facility is fully handicap accessible, and some other support spaces and offices. The upper section in the rear part of the building, that is where you have on the first floor a full-size college. I mean, not college. I take that back. It's a high school size basketball court. And up above it, on the second floor, you have a running track, or you call it a jogging track, that overlooks the basketball court. So that's basically the gist of the facility, without getting into too much detail. Going back.
Oh, yeah,
going
thank
back,
you. I wanted you to
Okay.
address very quickly, if you don't mind, Mr. Artist, the
Yes.
landscaping and screening that would provide a buffer and
Yes.
separation from the adjacent landowners.
Okay, I'm getting really to that pretty quick. So like I said, back behind it, you see the football field. Just left of the football field is a field house. So those are the basic facilities. And then along the left side, you have the parking. Now, there will be screening on that left side. There's a residential house on the other side of the screening. That screening will be in accordance with the UDO. We're working all of that out right now, and we don't see any problems as far as providing that screening. And it may take the form of a solid wall and some trees, some trees or shrubs. So that, like I said, that is being designed. On the rear of the facility, you have a 130-foot buffer between the rear of the facility and any buildings, that would be behind the building. So we also have plenty of room for screening back on that side. On the right side of the facility, there is existing screening from the church that currently exists, and you can see that off over on the other side. In the front, there also will be some screening required by the UDO, and we will be providing that. Like I said, right now we don't see any problems with that.
Thank you. There's also
what
some
you need?
fencing, right, Mr. Artis? What type
Beg
of
pardon?
fencing is being used for this facility to provide additional barrier?
I couldn't. What type of fencing? Is that what you said?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Probably be it's on the right side. We should be able to get away with a black chain link fence, but on the left side, we'll probably have a solid fence. It might be a vinyl or whatever. We haven't finalized that design yet, but you won't be able to see through it because you have a residential house on the other side. Like I say, on the right side, you have existing screening already, and we just have to put in a fence for security. But on the left side, we will provide that screening, and of course with the RDO.
Thank you. And between these natural and man-made barriers, do you anticipate that that will create a comfortable distance between the athletic fields and the neighboring residential properties?
Absolutely. You only have one property to the left that's in an earshot of the facility. On the right side, like I said, you have a church, and on the back side, you have a 130-foot buffer to any habitable apartments. There's some apartments or condos back there, and you have roughly 130 feet going back through the woods.
Thank you, Mr. Artis. I'm going to come back to you at a later slide. Ms. Yelverton, can you describe the operating hours for the facility and how traffic will be handled for pick up and drop off? And if we could return to the slide that begins, the proposed use is compatible with adjacent uses in terms of location, scale, site design, hours of operation.
Thank you, Attorney Crystal. While we're navigating to that respective slide. Yes, the hours of operation are typically going to be Monday through Friday, starting as early as 8 a.m. and ending sometime between 5 or 6 p.m. And then we may also have a Saturday day treatment event going on between maybe 9 a.m. or 1 p.m. In regards to drop off, pick up and drop off, we will have plenty or ample parking and room in our parking area for parents and or caregivers to make their drops for their children or for the respective students. We also have it designed or laid out where a bus will be able to come in and back out, back in within the parking area to be able to drive back out of our premises. And so it should be minimal off-street stops, so to speak, or minimal, I guess, any type of barrier or any type of stoppage for the flow of traffic.
So in other words, the parking area, and Mr. Artis, I'm sure can address this as well. The parking area should provide enough room for cars, the number of cars that you would expect for your participants in the program to be able to come in, drop off, turn around and out of the facility without causing a backup on Rock Quarry Road?
Yes, ma'am, as well as to account for our staff as well.
All right. And is there also a plan for a staff member to be available to assist with traffic drop off and pick up for safety?
Yes, ma'am. They would have the respective vest or proper safety gear and equipment to be able to direct that accordingly.
And will these hours of operation, in your opinion, be monitored to limit and reduce the noise that could be created from the activities and so that the neighbors can still enjoy their property?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. Further conditions that we would like to discuss are any adverse impacts resulting from the proposed use in the affected area will be effectively mitigated or offset, and that includes adequate site screening. It includes cutoff lighting fixtures, directional vehicular signage, and other site engineering controls. Mr. Artis, can you talk about these particular mitigating factors in more detail for the board?
Okay, I think I have addressed the site screening pretty good unless the board has additional questions. The cutoff light fixtures, we're using, yeah, they call them cutoff forward throw light fixtures that limit light spillage onto adjacent properties. We have sized that. We have done a foot candle analysis to make sure that we keep the lighting on the site and that we don't create negative impacts to adjacent properties. As far as directional vehicle signage, we plan to have that in place because we sort of look at the building as one facility, and we know that the football field has its own own image, if you would. And we also have put in a arm, if you would, that will allow us to shut down the rear of the facility when need be, so that there won't be any vehicles going back there when there's no games back there. So yeah, we will have all the necessary vehicle signage. Other site engineering controls that we may have will be speed bumps, caution striping, things of that nature. We have path lighting, ample sidewalks for safety, that type of thing. So we put a lot of time and energy to make sure that we contain everything on the site, recognizing that sometimes these football games, whatnot, can get a little loud. So we've done what we could to contain that.
Thank you. And can you explain to the board and describe how access with respect to pedestrian, bicycle, and automotive safety, traffic flow, and emergency service is adequate for this site plan?
Yes, we did an analysis whereby we looked at site turns and vehicle radii to make sure that 5 vehicles could get in and out of the site, without too much trouble. I don't think we have to worry about traffic on Rock Quarry Road because the site as designed, the entrance to the site as designed has been adjusted to recognize that there is a street widening project going on Rock Quarry Road by the state right now. So when you come out of the facility, there will be a 4-way stoplight. It's a 4-way, and it'll be a 4-way intersection. So I don't think you have to worry about any spillage out on Rock Quarry Road. As far as pedestrian safety is concerned, we've separated pedestrian from the vehicular traffic and put in, like I said, all of the caution striping and signage required to make sure that pedestrians can safely move between the building and the football field without interacting with the traffic.
And is the capacity for parking adequate for this size of a project?
Yes, it is. The building is based on I think it's about 400 square foot per parking space, and the football field is based on 1,000 square foot per parking space per the UDO, and we were able to achieve the 66 parking spaces that's required in support of that.
And are there turnarounds and signage in case emergency vehicles need to access the property?
Yes, that was specifically designed as previously spoken into the site layout.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. This is the site plan for the facility, Mr. Artist, and we talked about it earlier in your presentation, but using this as a illustration for your testimony, the signage that is planned for this facility, is it going to be the one unlit announcement sign that won't exceed 2 square feet in area and 3.5 feet in height, as required by section 6.2.3.D.2C?
Yes, it is. When we did the rendering, we were trying to bring some architectural features to the building, and I think it's very attractive, pretty attractive what we did. However, the UDO would not allow that type of signage of that size in that type of zoning. So we will cut back the signage and we will adhere to the regulations. No problem. We'll do that.
And as far as any appropriate dedications of streets and utilities to the public, will they be made prior to the issuance of any building permits?
Yes, we're currently working with the city of Raleigh. The entrance, as you see it, that is I call it a paper road that the city has in their IMAP system, and so that piece of asphalt would feed right on into a paper road in the event that the adjacent site to the left would be developed. So that piece of pavement would probably need to be dedicated to the city so that it will be maintained by the city. So that will be taken care of prior to any building permit.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Artist. Next slide, please. This slide just basically reiterates the points that Mr. Artist just made in terms of being able to navigate through and mitigate any adverse impact on the surrounding area. And next slide, please. Part of this again shows the rendering of the facility, including some of the surrounding area and the first floor and second floor of the interior of the building. And I would like to call on Ms. Vicki Yelverton to please wrap up for the board and describe again how this special use facility will benefit the community.
Thank you, Attorney Crystal. And again, I'm not sure if Ms. Tiki will be able to also share, but Yelverton's is excited at the opportunity to continue to serve the community. We've been successfully doing so for over 15 years, and we hold international accreditation. We also hold our licensure through the Department of Health and Service Regulation. And so while we're able to provide this level of support to the community, to the students in need, again, we're excited to be able to integrate mental wellness and physical wellness, being able to meet the children where they are, being able to do skill building activities while also doing other activities that kind of take their mind off of the fact that they're actually learning something behavioral related. We also are excited at the opportunity to expand our services to be able to serve that side of the Raleigh area. And there are adjacent schools that we currently support that will be also in close proximity to, including preeminent charter school. So again, we appreciate everyone's time today in hearing our case regarding our ongoing journey in serving and providing mental wellness supports to the community.
And Ms. Yelverton, of everything you've heard today in terms of the evidence that's been presented in this presentation, has AV Ventures NC LLC in conjunction with Yes Inc., to the best of their ability, plan this special care facility in conjunction with and pursuant to and in compliance with the UDO guidelines for this type of project?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Chair Swink, that would conclude the presentation for my client.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Redden. I appreciate that. Understand that Tiki Wrighton has signed up to speak in support of this application. Ms. Wrighton, if you were with us, would you please state your address and your relationship to the case, and I will reaffirm your oath.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Tiki Wrighton. I am at 3838 Cheehaw Drive, Raleigh, North Carolina, and I am the Dean of Special Education and Intervention here at Preeminent Charter School.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Go right ahead, please.
So I would just like to start by saying that, as a educator going into this school year, we were aware that there would be a lot of challenges coming back from COVID and students returning from remote learning. What we were not prepared for was the amount of mental illnesses that students as young as the age of 5 would how it would present themselves in the school setting. And so for us receiving support from a program such as this, we are able to provide students with those resources. There is a lack of resources. There's a lack of knowledge when it comes to parents, knowing what services that are available for their students, knowing how to handle students. And it's the same way with educators, as far as being able to educate teachers on how to deal with students when it comes to mental illness and behaviors. And so this program will allow a lot of staff training. It would allow us to be able to provide these resources to parents. Right now, during a typical day, a lot of instructional time is spent because students are having mental health issues, and a lot of times there's nowhere for us to turn to immediately or have resources readily available. So partnering with a program like this will be very beneficial to us and to the success of students, so we can get back to the instructional piece, the teaching.
Okay, thank you very much. And I apologize, I neglected to give the board the opportunity to ask any questions of Ms. Redding and the witnesses that she brought to us today. I jumped the gun there. So board members, if you have any questions regarding Ms. Redding's presentation or those of any of her witnesses, okay, you'll have another chance to come back to that. I apologize for skipping. We do have one opponent who signed up to also speak today in this regard, Sherry Lee. Ms. Lee, if you would state your address and your relationship to the case, and then I will reaffirm your oath, please.
Oh, yes. Our property address is 3317 Rock Quarry Road, just on the left of this property.
Okay, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Then please go ahead.
My question is, will that whole facility have a fence as a lock or something? So my concern is when of the hour, the public, they can use the court or play basketball.
Okay, so you're asking a question about access to the facility and the hours of access?
After hour, like Sunday evening.
Hours. Okay. Is that okay? And we'll get an answer to your question. Do you have other questions? I want to see where this is going to go first.
The other question is, when I look at that architecture, it seems like the entry driveway is on our property, as I can see the property line. So make sure they will stay off our property line.
Okay, then let's start with your first question. Ms. Redding, if you would, or one of your witnesses would like to answer the question about after hours use of the basketball facilities or the facility itself.
Thank you, Chair Swink. I would ask Mr. Yelverton to address that question, please.
Yes, sure, I can address that. So with the respect to after-hour programs, there may be a possibility for that. But considering this is a special use facility, they have to be a member of our program. So this would not be something that be accessible to the public.
Default state.
being respectful hours. So if we have an evening program that's geared towards the mental health programs, that's what it will be. But it would not be accessible from just anyone general in public to use the facility.
Okay. And the second question had to do with the driveway access and where it is located. I know that was addressed by Mr. Artis, but could we get clarification on that for Ms. Lee?
Yes. We unfortunately haven't had an opportunity to discuss it with Ms. Lee. The road that you see going in, it is true. It is, some of it is on her property. However, it is in line with a street that the city has planned in there. I guess they planned in their master plan, if you would. We run into that at a number of sites that we have where the city has planned roads. So I think to try to explain that and try to mitigate that is going to probably require a little bit more than we can do here today. And what I would ask if we could get with Miss Lee and go through this and explain it thoroughly to her if it's possible.
Mr. Booker, is there anything you would like to say in that regard?
Yeah, I would just like to say, I believe there is a current development plan being reviewed for this site. So any of our development standards would be reviewed. And obviously if things things will be reviewed for where they will be built, and the appropriate improvements will be on the land that has the entitlement for what is being built. So.
And can you just speak to any reassurance for Ms. Lee about what happens going forward and any voice she might have in anything that happens?
In terms of the...
It looks like the road is on her property. Surely she would have some, would she be able to at least be made aware of that and understand why that's happening, if that in fact is the case?
Yes, I mean, if anything is being proposed on her property, she would be made aware, or she should be made aware. And this is why these projects go through development review. Essentially, they can't build a road on her property straight up. So,
Yeah, I can, just as Catherine too, I can jump in. I mean, I think what Justin's saying is that this will all be looked at if, they'll be held within their site, within their property. So that there's no way something can be approved. A property owner can be approved to develop on their neighbor's property without their neighbor's permission.
Right. Thank you. Ms. Lee, are you okay with that? Does that make sense to you?
Yes, at least from that graphic, I can tell our driveway is on their new driveway. It seems like, from the graphic, I can tell that their driveway is our driveway right now.
Okay, well, that will be addressed going forward, and you will have a voice in that. So I'm glad you recognized that and brought it to our attention.
I have one more question. Is okay?
Go ahead.
At earlier presentation, they mentioned there might be a solid fence on the left. So we like to know what kind of fence, the barrier between this facility with our house.
Well, the city standards will come in here as to what type of buffer will be required. Mr. Booker, I'm going to jump the line and ask you if you have an idea what the answer would be for that.
no, I'm not sure. I believe the applicant should know which fencing would be required.
I'll go back to the applicant.
The the actual material, we're still finalizing that, but it would be a fence that you can't see through, whether it be vinyl or whether it be a wood fence. That's what we're at on it right now. The final material, we just haven't come to terms with that as of yet. But like I say, it will be a solid fence. That I can tell you. And it will be, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I still have a question is regarding, you mentioned that, because I early presentation, I heard that that be solid fence.
Yes.
But you mentioned, you did not mention the solid fence. You mentioned probably is some natural plant or whatever. May I ask if you add the fence, how high the fence is? 4 feet or 6 feet or 8 feet?
6 feet, at least 6 feet, about around 6 feet.
The solid
See,
fence, right?
yeah, what you have to do is what they call a transitional yard. The city it designates what that's got to look like. They don't tell you what the fence has to be made out of, but they do have certain distances, requirements, heights, that type of thing that the fence and any type of vegetation or landscaping would have to meet. And that's basically what we're doing. And we assume that you want to have a solid fence there. We assume that. Isn't that correct? Isn't that what you would want?
Yes, because the facility is so close to our house.
Yes.
It has a basketball there. So I do not know how to enforce that court will not turn out to be the public court on the weekend. So maybe after hour, like late evening, I was wondering how you can enforce that if that cannot be turned to the public court there.
Well, it has to do with the certification, the type of facility that it is. I would have to go to Ms. Yelverton for more specifics on that.
Yes, and again, as we stated, the area is not available for public use, and so we will have like a lock available so that folks will not just be able to have access to our field areas. And again, with the fencing that Mr. Mike had referenced and under the guidance of the city, we'll make sure that it's a properly heighted fence for that. But it's a private property. It would not be available for public use. We will enforce that. We will also have cameras available in the respective areas for security.
One moment, please. One moment, please. Mr. Puccini, did you have a question?
Sorry, I just wanted to verify who was speaking at that time. Was that you, Ms. Yelverton? Or was that?
Yes, sir. My apologies. Vicky Yelverton. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. I want to be sure and recognize the voice. Thank you.
Very good point, Ralph. Yeah, when we do switch answers, we need to be sure we know who's speaking. Okay, Ms. Lee, any other questions from you?
That's all. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Appreciate your making the effort to be a part of this. Okay, Ms. Redding, we also offer you the chance to question Ms. Lee if you wish to cross-examine her on any of these issues she has raised.
Thank you, Chair Swink. I would defer to the answers that have been given by the witnesses. And in case Ms. Lee has any further concerns, we do have her direct contact information, and we can continue this dialogue after today for sure as this development continues down the road.
Thank you. It's good to know. That'd be appreciated. Okay, so let's move back to closing this, but before we close it, board members, do you have any questions, anything you've heard you want to get clarification on? Nothing from the board?
I had a couple questions. Sorry, I didn't get
Ms. Rizzo, go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't get myself unmuted quickly enough.
Sorry.
Just reading through the applicant presentation and just double checking, this property is not going to have nighttime operating hours, correct? This says up until like 6 o'clock.
Hello, this is Vicky Yelverton speaking again. Typically, our normal day of operation will be until 6 p.m. However, if we have like an after, like a meeting or a workshop or seminar for parents, then of course we want to adhere to their schedule of availability and coming in after work hours. But it shouldn't go beyond, perhaps 9 p.m.
Yeah, and there's no overnight.
No overnight. This is a day program, no overnight.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to ask because I know this has residential housing in the area, so just checking what the impact on that would be. So,
Great question. Great question.
Okay, thank you. Other board members, questions? Okay, then let us close the evidentiary hearing and move to our board deliberations. This is a special use permit case. Entertain conversation, discussion, or a motion.
Mr. Swink, this is Catherine. If I can also just point out that the applicant has discussed and proposed some conditions that have been just talked about generally. So just remember that if you vote to approve, it's just approving the special use permit. If you would like to impose any conditions, that needs to be done specifically. So.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry, I did not hear conditions. Could you?
I just meant in terms of like the hours of operations and all of that. So you don't have to do that, but I just want to make sure everybody's clear that we're just talking about approving a special use permit and right.
Right. Thank you. No, always appreciate that reminder. So yes, special use permit, but we can, questions were raised. If we have conditions we want to propose, we have that opportunity. Their proposal does speak to specific hours of operation. But any other thing, anyone?
yeah, I mean, similarly to, I guess, a school, I guess there are requirements that, city and the school districts put on school facilities to make certain that the people at the school are secure, they don't wander off site. I just want to make certain that that's the case with this, that people at the site are secure and there aren't issues with people off site being disturbed. So maybe some conditions would be useful, just ensuring it's fenced. And also not having noise to disturb the residents who live adjacent to the property.
Are you want to propose specific conditions, or are you just thinking out loud?
Well, thinking out loud, and I mean, I'm sensitive to what other board members think about this. If they, like, for example, I worked with respect to a daycare and us getting approval for that some time ago, but I remember the issues that the neighbors had raised and were concerned about. So if we could anticipate that and prevent future issues, that's my concern.
Okay, thank you. I will point out that in terms of adjacent neighbors, there's church on one side or single residence on the other, a significant buffer to the back, and then across the Rock Quarry Road. I don't recall what is exactly across Rock Quarry Road, but I know that in terms of immediate adjacency to residences, it's fairly limited. But that is an issue if you are concerned about that. What we can do is, if you want to raise that first as a question, I can reopen the evidentiary hearing and give the applicant a chance to respond. If that is a concern you have, then I think it would be fair to give them the chance to respond. So I'm going to open the evidentiary hearing again. And Ms. Redding, you've heard the thinking out loud here. Do you have any, you or Ms. Yelverton or any of your others have any response to that?
Yes, Chair Swink, and thank you, Board Member Rudisil, also for the question and for the concern that you've expressed. Ms. Yelverton can address that issue, as well as Mr. Yelverton, if he cares to chime in regarding the security measures that they have implemented at their other sites that ensure the safety of the participants in the program, as well as surrounding properties. So either or both Ms. Yelverton and Mr. Yelverton can address the security measure, and perhaps Mr. Yelverton can emphasize when the outdoor activities would take place and how those potential adverse impacts would be mitigated.
Okay, good day again. This is Vicki Yelverton. Under our licensure requirements, we have to have the proper ratio of staff to oversee the student population. And so we will have our qualified professionals on staff, as well as our licensed clinicians on staff. and they will be responsible for monitoring the ratio of students and ensuring their safety. This is not a locked facility. This is not a hospital. This is not a inpatient facility. And so again, while we are going to adhere to all of our security measures and also the safety measures of our students, I wanted to make mention that it is not a locked facility.
Thank you. And Mr. Yelverton, could you add additional information in this regard?
Yes, I can. This is Antoine Yelverton. Piggyback on what Vicki just mentioned as far as security measures. At our current facility, we definitely are held to a standard of staff and client ratios at all times during the operations. And again, we want to stress the emphasis of this being an enclosed parameter property. Ms. Lee, she shared her comments and her concerns. I look forward to having a further discussion with her. But with the Redeeming Church, it does have a gate at the front entrance, which we are adamant about adding as well as the fenced-in option. So it would be limited, access for anyone that is not a member of this facility. I also wanted to share, there was a comment about comparing it to school regulations and guidance. But keep in mind, again, we're held by certain bounds and certain standards with our license. So even if there is an after-hour program that's going on with the members only, there is measures that we will have as far as like noise, access, and also the people in attendance. So, you know, I just want to reemphasize that because I don't think it's right to try to hold us to a certain hour of operation per se, especially if there's a recreational component we're offering for the improvement of our mental health for our consumers.
And with even the number of participants, Mr. Yelverton, that might participate, let's say in what is being characterized as after hours operation, is there still a limit to the number of persons who would even be in attendance at that type of activity for the participants?
I would say it's definitely a limit to, and Mike Artis can speak to the facility itself, but you know, we can have, I don't know, 15, 20 kids maybe participating in a certain function that may run over. We're not sure, but we know with the ratio requirement is well over that. It can get into the hundreds. Not saying that we'll have that many people at our site at one time, but I think we're well within our boundaries and what the restrictions would be to not pose a significant harm to the neighbors and the surrounding facilities and housing. Again, a 100-foot buffer in the back of the property, that's, you know, not a major concern. Redeeming Church is to the right. So, you know, there's the commercial operations with the church. I think the only one that I should have a level of concern is Miss Lee, property, I guess as close to the facility, that, you know, that can definitely be minimized.
And Attorney Crystal, this is Vicki Yelverton again. Again, we adhere to the staffing ratio for the safety of the students as well as the safety of, you know, adhering to the requirements for special care facility. You know, our goal is to continue to destigmatize mental health, and we want to make this a normalized environment for our students and for the community.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, okay, thank you. Board members, other questions? We've reopened the opportunity for you to ask questions. Okay, let's then reclose the evidentiary hearing and move to our board deliberations. And I'll entertain a motion.
This is Don. I would make the motion to approve. I know we had some discussions there about some condition, and I'm still not sure what condition we will be able to add at this particular time, but I would definitely go ahead and make a motion to approve, pending the outcome, I guess, the discussion there with the neighbor, making sure that that those conditions are met.
So, okay, so you have a motion to approve and you're recommending as part of the motion or as a sidebar statement that they continue their conversations with the neighbor?
I would say it's a sidebar. I think that, that one of the things that they could probably work out with the neighbors seem like based on the conversation.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second it.
Mr. Rainey was a second. Okay, motion to approve in a second. Further discussion? Then let us move to a roll call vote, please.
Give me one moment, I was trying to make sure I got Mr. Miles' thing right. It was a sidebar statement. It's not part of the motion.
That's correct.
Motion is just to approve, period.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, on the motion to approve, Mr. Miles?
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Rainey.
Approve.
Thank you, Chairman Swink.
Approve.
Thank you, Ms. Rudisill.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Coons.
Approve.
Thank you. That's
Okay,
five.
Thank you very much. And I do hope you'll continue your conversations with Ms. Lee and resolve any questions that you have there. Okay, let's move on to evidentiary hearing 8. This is 200, 206, and 210 Southwest Street. Research Triangle Regional Public Transportation Authority, the property owner. This is BOA 0082-2021. Mr. Booker, bring us up to date.
Yes, thank you. This next case, it's located at 200, 206, and 210 Southwest Street. The property owner, Research Triangle Regional Public Transportation Authority, requests a variance for complete relief from the 3-foot primary street setback requirements as set forth in UDO section 3.2.6.B1. And this is in association with the construction of a bus transit facility. And I'll go on to the next slide. So the lots shown here in yellow comprise of 1.76 acres size, and they are zoned DX40 CU. Just here is a closer aerial of the property. Per the applicant, the existing east and north facades of the building encroach into the right-of-way, and portions of these facades are intended to be preserved in their current location and incorporated into the new transit facility, hence the need for the variance. Both Southwest Street and West Hargett Street are considered to be primary streets, so the 3-foot primary street building setback requirement is applicable to both of those frontages. And here is the applicant provided plot plan. Happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I can hand it over to the applicant for their presentation.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the board? Okay, let us move along to Molly Stewart. Ms. Stewart, welcome. You'll take us through your applicant's case, please.
Thank you. Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group, 421 Fayetteville Street, Raleigh. I also have with me today as a potential witness, Natalie Carmen, project engineer from Stewart. I'd like to request that our application and presentation materials be entered into the record.
Okay.
Thank you. So the slide you see on your screen is here really for just orientation. You're all familiar with Raleigh Union Station there at the bottom right, and the plaza in front of it just above. So north is to your left and south is to your right here. And the site that we're looking at is the future home of Raleigh Union Station Bus Station, otherwise known as Russ Bus. It's across from the Dillon there to the east and across from Citrix to the north. Next slide, please. Just to give you a feel for the overall project, there's a lot going on this site. Go Triangle owns the property, and the idea is to provide a true mixed-use experience here in this expanded transit hub with the rail and the bus uses. That the tower that you see, or the two-part tower that you see there to the left of your screen or in the center, that's a hotel tower with a residential tower to the north, with retail along West Street as well. And then, of course, the bus station within. Next slide, please. And just another view of the same building, and here we're looking northwest. This is sort of as though you're standing on West Street. And I want to draw your attention to those areas shown. I think you can tell that those are supposed to be brick there, where you see there in the corner, heading into the plaza, as well as north along West Street. That's just one view of the brick that is intended. Next slide, please. And these are the existing buildings on the site. As you know, this is part of the warehouse district, and we have some existing warehouse buildings on the site, built in 1920. The plan for the project is to be able to accomplish all of the uses that you saw while maintaining some of the architecture and the scale of the street, and to retain a piece of the history of the warehouse district. In order to do that, portions of these existing brick walls are proposed to be maintained in place. Next slide, please. So this is a more of a plan view of that first floor. North is again to your left, and that's West Street at the top of your screen and Hargett at the left. So this is a zoomed out view. We're going to zoom in a little bit so that you can see more clearly what's going on. But I just wanted you to see the overview there and where the bus is coming through. Next slide, please. First, I'll begin by zooming in on the key, and this is what's important. So there you see that property line in yellow, and of course the required 3-foot setback in red, and those don't vary with respect to each other, so you'll see that consistently around the site. The blue line, of course, is that building outline, and that's going to vary quite a bit as we go around the property. Now, you heard Justin say earlier that that some of these walls actually sit within the right-of-way, and that's true. We'll talk more about that. We are here, of course, only for the setback request, so that 3 feet between the property line and the required setback. So that is the request that we're making today. Like you said, that building does extend into the right-of-way. That is a separate sort of approval that the city would have to give us, but here, we're here just for that setback variance. Next slide, please. So starting, I'll go sort of roughly clockwise around the site. So starting at, this is the northwest corner of the site. And so you see that blue line, and here it does extend in places, not only beyond the setback, but also into that right-of-way as we talked about. And that really, the idea is, most of this is new, but this is continuing the building line from what we'll see as we move to the east. Next slide, please. And here, as we move to the corner of Hargett and West Street, that's where you really see this is that preserved corner. So here's where that blue line starts to project out into the street. And as I mentioned, we're just looking for that 3-foot setback variance, which would allow us to put the building line on the right-of-way line. And we will have to get that separate approval to actually keep it there in the street. Next slide, please. And here we move down West Street toward the Raleigh Union Station Plaza area. And here, again, we are within the setback in certain areas, and that is, again, existing building. We don't have that same setback along the plaza. That is actually a 0-foot required setback, so we don't have the same request on that side. This is really just along West Street and along Hargett Street. So that is what the request is about. We could just leave it. Yeah, we could leave it there. That's perfect. So I did want to go through the standards that we need to meet in order to be granted a variance today. The first being that an unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the ordinance. Here, a strict application of the ordinance would simply require those walls to go away. It is not going to be workable to be able to preserve those walls in their current state, but to move them. And so that is not something that could happen in a different location. As I mentioned, those were constructed in 1920. So similar to what you see at the Dillon across the street, we would be able to keep some of those pieces in place. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll get back to the I'll get back to this point. If we could go back to you, that's perfect. The hardship does result from conditions peculiar to the property, these existing 100-year-old buildings. And of course, the applicant or property owner did not build these buildings. And the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance in multiple ways. First, by maintaining a piece of that existing built character of the warehouse district. Preserving that facade will only provide benefit to the city without detriment. As I mentioned, those walls exist in that location today. Also, the Comprehensive Plan Policy DT Downtown 3.1, it supports application of a shop front frontage, particularly along West Street here. And as you actually heard earlier today with the Creamery site, generally supported in that DX district that we're in here. That frontage, that shop front frontage, as you heard earlier, would have replaced that required 3-foot setback with a build to that can be as little as 0 feet. So it would have allowed that building to be up at the right of way, that 0-foot setback. What happened on this site, because of the intensive access needs of a bus station, it's simply not possible to actually apply the shop front frontage. It doesn't apply here. It limits the ability to access the site in a fairly extreme way, and so it's not compatible with a bus station. However, when this site was rezoned to allow for the bus station, they did their best to approximate a shop front frontage by including certain conditions that reflect some of those requirements, such as a mixed-use building type, prohibiting parking between the building and the street, requiring pedestrian access along West Street, and requiring the ground story along West Street to have active uses to really try to recreate that frontage. Unfortunately, one thing that you cannot do through a zoning condition is to loosen the requirements of the UDO and to have reduced that setback to 0 feet, as the shop front frontage would have done, cannot be done with a zoning condition. And so that requirement remains. And so we're here to make that request to move up to that right of way. And as I mentioned, we are actually already in talks with the city attorney's office to take that next step to get the separate approval that we would need to actually have those walls remain in place within the right of way. And that is underway. So today's approval would be necessary but not sufficient to keep the wall in place in its existing location. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, any questions for Ms. Stewart? No one? Okay, we had no one else sign up to speak either in support or in opposition to this case. So unless there's further thought to offer, I'm going to close the evidentiary hearing so that we might move to board deliberations and a possible motion.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Koontz. We have a motion to approve. May I have a second?
I think that was Rainey who made a motion to approve, but I will second Rainey's.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for your correction. Mr. Rainey moved to approve with Mr. Koontz seconding. I appreciate that. Further discussion? Then let's move to a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. On the motion to approve, Mr. Rainey.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Koontz.
Approve.
Thank you, Chairman Swink.
Approve.
Thank you, Ms. Rudisill.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Mile.
Approve.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more hearing today, and there seems to be quite a bit of interest in this one, so I think this one may take a while. So I'm going to ask for a brief recess. Ms. Hill, I see you raising your hand.
Yes, we have been contacted by the applicant, and it's my understanding that they want to request a continuance. I don't know if you still want to do a recess or not, but the applicant's attorney, Mr. Birch, is on the line to make that request once you open the case.
Terrific. Well, then let's move right along. Thank you so much for that. This is case 1333, 1335, 1337, 1339, 1341, and 1343 Cortland Drive. This is 1335 Cortland LLC property owner, BOA 83-2021. And Mr. Birch, I understand you have a request for us.
Yes, sir, Chairman Swink. On behalf of the applicant, we are asking that the board defer discussion of this matter until the board's meeting on March 14th to allow for some additional time for some conversation with those who are in opposition to the request.
Okay, thank you very much. Without further comment, unless the board has an objection, we will continue this to the March 14th, or defer it to the March 14th board meeting, at which time we will take it up. So thank you, Mr. Birch, for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you.
So that changes the complexity of what I was thinking the next hour might look like. So let's move along to our other business. That would be the approval of the minutes from our January 10th, 2022 board meeting. They were sent out to us. Any additions or corrections or a motion to approve?
They look good to me. Motion to approve, Coons.
Mr. Pacini, you gave us
I just wanted to make sure that the chairman had noted earlier that in those minutes, I had Mr. Sutton as being attending and he was not. So I made the minutes have been corrected to remove Mr. Sutton as having attended. So that those are the ones that will be published that you are going to approve.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Coontz, you move to approve. I'm going to second. So we have a motion to approve in a second. We'll go to the roll call vote for that.
Thank you. Approved to approve the minutes as corrected. Mr. Coons?
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Swink.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Mile.
Approve.
Thank you, Ms. Rudisil.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Rainey.
Approve.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. A report of our board's attorney, Ms. Hill. I see some beautiful red roses in your background. I wonder if that's just a coincidence or.
No, happy Valentine's Day to everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Happy Valentine's Day.
I'll let my husband know you noticed him. He'll appreciate that. No, nothing really to report. One thing that we've been talking about is trying to schedule a retreat for you all, and Keegan's helping with that. I don't know that have we set out a poll or looking at dates? I think staff's gonna look for some dates that work as well.
Yeah.
So,
Catherine, this is Keegan. I just want to, yeah, we did send out a poll. I think most people have responded, but if you've not, of course, please do so. That way we can try and choose a time that works best for everyone. But it looks like there are a few available dates that should work for the majority of folks.
yeah, and we actually, if you guys remember, before COVID, we wanted to have a retreat. I think the month that everything got shut down. So it's been that long since we've done one. I always think it's a good idea to do kind of a legal refresher every year or so. And then, of course, any other topics you all want to talk about, I can update you on some case law that's happened and, just a chance to check in. So working on getting that set up.
Okay, great. Good. Anyone have anything else to offer today? It's been a lengthy session. Thank you for your patience working through all this. Some good discussions. And unless someone has any other business to offer, I wish you all a happy Valentine's Day, and we stand adjourned until our March 14th meeting.
You too.
Stay well.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.